LoveLore Library. Chapter 237. Shang Junlin's footsteps paused. Shen Yu could clearly feel that the man's body instantly tensed up. He leaned on the man's shoulder and chuckled. Shang Junlin lightly said, "Don't make trouble." The young man on the side opened his eyes wide and looked at the scene in front of him. "You are." Shen Yu remembered that he shouldn't teach children bad things. The words on the tip of his tongue turned a few times, but he didn't say it. "Is your relationship the same as His Majesty's?" The young man didn't dare to keep staring at them. He lowered his head and walked forward. He was young and couldn't hide his curiosity. After walking for a while, he couldn't help but ask. Shen Yu was interested. He leaned on the man's shoulder and turned to look at the young man. "Then tell me, what is the relationship between His Majesty and His Majesty?" "It's very loving. His Majesty doesn't want anyone else for His Majesty, and he doesn't allow anyone to bully His Majesty. When I grow up, I want to be like His Majesty, only marry the person I like, protect her well, and don't let anyone bully her," the young man said seriously. "Good ambition." Shen Yu was amused. "You can definitely do it in the future." The young man's idea was affirmed, and the joy in his eyes could no longer be hidden. "I also want to be like His Majesty, a great general, protect Dahuan, and beat back all the people who bully us." "Then you will definitely become a great general in the future," Shen Yu said. The young man opened his mouth and talked a lot about His Majesty's heroic deeds. He didn't know that His Majesty was beside him, and he was silently listening to the conversation between the two. Shen Yu held back his laughter. Listening to the young man talk about His Majesty in his mind, if it wasn't for the circumstances, he would like to ask what the protagonist of this conversation was thinking. The two kept talking, and unknowingly, they arrived at their destination. The young man stopped and pointed to the front. "It's there. We picked up the cup there." In the forest in front, there were some messy mounds. The mounds had obvious traces of being moved. Shen Yu patted Shang Junlin's shoulder. "Lin, put me down first." In front of outsiders, Shen Yu naturally would not address Shang Junlin as His Majesty. Along the way, they did not reveal their true identities. Shang Junlin put Shen Yu down. The two of them approached the mound. Shen Yu broke a branch from the side and poked it in the soil. "Everything that can be used has been taken back by the villagers. The rest are all broken and can't be used." The teenager saw Shen Yu's movements and explained. After digging for a while, Shen Yu saw some broken porcelain inside. "Is no one curious about where these things came from?" Shen Yu threw the branch aside and asked. The conversation along the way made Shen Yu gain a good impression in the boy's heart. The boy told him everything he knew to this young brother who recognized his ambition. "I'm curious. With so many good things, everyone is naturally curious." The village chief even specially organized people to go up the mountain to search for them. Unfortunately, they didn't find anything. They walked around the vicinity but found nothing. However, it was not normal for these imperial items to appear here. Hence, some of the hidden dragon guards were left to continue searching. Shen Yu and Shang Junlin were led down the mountain by the teenager. The round trip took a few hours. When they reached the foot of the mountain, the road was almost dry. At this time, Shen Yu and Shang Junlin should be on their way back to the capital. However, the two of them were more concerned about the imperial items that suddenly appeared. Hence, they did not leave immediately. After going up the mountain, their clothes were dirty. The two of them changed their clothes and sat down in the house. Does this batch of imperial items have anything to do with what Grand Tutor Xing mentioned before? Shen Yu thought about it and felt that the imperial items shouldn't have suddenly appeared here. This village was very normal. The answers given by the hidden dragon guards would not be wrong. After the imperial items were filed, they would be properly stored. Even if they were given out as rewards, they would be recorded. After Shang Junlin ascended the throne, there was a special official in charge of this area. During the drought in the north, the Ministry of Revenue reorganized the items in the national treasury. If there were any missing items, they should have known. Since there were no missing items, it meant that there was nothing wrong with the items in the national treasury. This batch of items could only have been leaked out before Shang Junlin ascended the throne. The imperial court has already found the whereabouts of the imperial items that Grand Tutor Xing mentioned. According to him, there should be another batch of items that are wandering outside. Regardless of whether we met them here or not, we have to find out what is going on. In order not to alarm others, Shang Junlin did not inform the local government. He left the investigation to the Hidden Dragon Guards. 2 days later, the Hidden Dragon Guards reported that they had found the whereabouts of the imperial items. It was a cave hidden in the middle of the mountain. Perhaps it was because of the heavy rain all year round, the cave was damaged to a certain extent. Part of the cave that was hidden in the cave flowed out along with the soil and was coincidentally discovered by the villagers. Shen Yu and Shang Junlin stood in the cave and were momentarily speechless. In front of them were boxes of different sizes. Some of the boxes had already been opened by the Hidden Dragon Guards, revealing the items inside. What came into view were boxes of jewelry. Most of them were gold and silver. Shen Yu casually picked up a gemstone and could tell that it was of high quality. I didn't expect that finding a random place to hide from the rain would yield such a harvest. Shen Yu put down the gemstone in his hand and sighed. This matter was completely out of Shang Junlin's expectations. He had sent people to various places in Dahuan to search for the other batch of items that the late emperor might have left behind. He did not expect that in the end, they would be the ones who found it by chance. Indeed, a Yu is my lucky star. Shang Junlin sighed softly. Your Majesty, why do you say so? Shang Junlin shook his head and did not reply. If he was not worried about Shen Yu's health, even if it was raining, Shang Junlin would not have found a place to stay for the night. That way, he would have missed this village and missed out on everything that happened later. As the weather cleared up, they still had important matters to attend to in the capital. They did not stay for long and left some hidden dragon guards to guard the place. Shang Junlin and Shen Yu embarked on the journey back to the capital. After settling the matters in the capital, they would send people to deal with these items. This time, the Minister of Revenue will be happy. In the carriage, Shen Yu opened the curtains and said. The Minister of Revenue was excited for a few days when he collected the items from Grand Tutor Xing. He generously gave out a lot of money. During that period of time, if the imperial court needed to spend money on anything, it would be very lively. The ministers lamented that it would be great if the Minister of Revenue could always be so easygoing. Shang Junlin was thinking about something and did not respond immediately. The carriage continued to move forward. This time, they did not stop halfway and directly arrived at a small town near the capital. They had received news from the Prime Minister that a storm was brewing in the capital. This time, even the people in the capital could faintly feel that something was wrong. The temperature has dropped. Has His Majesty and Guijun not returned to the capital yet? Yes, in the past, they would not stay outside for so long. Counting the time, it has been almost 3 months. Could it be that His Majesty and Guijun are enjoying their time outside and have forgotten about home? It would be the same if they returned to the capital. Life in the imperial palace would not be worse than in the temporary residence, right? I have an uncle who works in Lord Fang's family. He said that Lord Fang has not contacted his family for a long time. Maybe something has delayed him. Not only that, but the other officials have also been worried recently. I don't know if you have noticed that the Prime Minister has been living in seclusion recently. I see that some of the officials are very active. 2 days ago, there was a wedding banquet held by an official and many officials were invited. The Prime Minister also went. If the people could feel it, the officials could feel it even more clearly. As the days passed, there was still no news from the temporary residents. Many people could not sit still. What is going on with His Majesty? Is there any news? The more attentive officials found that some unknown changes had occurred. They did not know what exactly had happened, so they could only observe carefully. The Prime Minister's presence had unknowingly begun to decrease. On the contrary, Lord Duan's presence had become stronger and stronger. The balance between the aristocratic officials and the humble officials that Shang Junlin had maintained in the imperial court was faintly being broken. A few officials who had a good relationship with the Prime Minister came to the Prime Minister's residence to discuss countermeasures. Does Lord Duan also not know what has happened? What are these aristocratic officials led by Lord Duan trying to do? The elementary school that was in the process of being established was stopped. At the same time, other policies that were being implemented were also affected. The humble officials were caught off guard by the sudden attack of the aristocratic officials and gradually fell into a disadvantageous position. Are they not afraid that His Majesty will punish them when he returns to the capital? Or... He didn't finish his sentence, but everyone present knew what he was trying to say. The aristocratic officials were so fearless. Did they know some inside information that they did not know? What was His Majesty's state now? What happened in the imperial palace? One question after another hovered in their minds. They could not figure out why there was a problem this time. If we had known this would happen, we would not have agreed to His Majesty's request to bring so few people to the imperial palace. Even if we did not agree, what can we do? How many times has His Majesty changed his decision? This sentence was the truth. The officials knew that until now, the only person who had the ability to persuade Shang Junlin to change his decision was probably Xinyu. I don't know how His Majesty's situation is. Is there any movement in Count North's residence? No. Speaking of which, isn't Count North too quiet during this period of time? Before, he was still interacting with many officials and wanted to return to the imperial court. Now it seems that there is no movement. Count North's illegitimate son was convicted because he wanted to hurt His Majesty. I don't know how His Majesty plans to deal with Count North. Count North was also very nervous about his own ending. He could see how much the Emperor valued his legitimate son. He also knew that this time, Shen Qingran wanted to hurt Xinyu, and it would not be over so easily. How many people could bear the Emperor's anger? As long as the knife hanging over his head did not fall, Count North would not be at ease. In Count North's residence, Count North sat on the main seat in the study. Several people sitting below him were his confidants. One of them said, "Count North, you have to make a decision early." "That's my only son." Duke Xinbei hesitated. If eldest young master and Count North were of the same mind, Count North would naturally not need to consider this. But eldest young master is obviously not. Count North should think more for yourself. This time, no one knows if the matter of second young master will implicate Count North. His confidant advised. Count North, it is clear at a glance which is more important, the merit of supporting the Emperor and a legitimate son who is not on your side. Chapter 238. Sir Jinbei relaxed. He knew what his confidant said was reasonable, but at the same time, it was too risky to do so. A few days ago, a man who claimed to have the imperial edict of the late emperor came to Sir Jinbei's residence and said that Shang Junlin had used dishonorable means to ascend the throne. After so many years of planning, it was finally time to restore the throne. As a hereditary marquis, Sir Jinbei hoped that Sir Jinbei could make the right choice. Sir Jinbei didn't agree immediately and only said that he needed to think about it. After that man left, he called his confidant for a meeting. Until today, he still hadn't made a decision. Shang Junlin had ascended the throne for so many years and had a solid foundation. It was too risky to make a move at this time. Moreover, his son was the only one in Shang Junlin's harem. If there were no accidents, he would be the only one who could stand beside the emperor. He didn't need to take such a big risk to do something that had an uncertain future. I still think that it's not reliable. If that man comes again in the future, just say that I'm sick and don't bring him to see me. Surgeonbei thought for a long time and made a decision. Sir. His confidant didn't expect that Surgeonbei was still unmoved. He couldn't help but feel anxious. Sir, why don't you think about it more? You're trying to make me rebel. That's why I want to ask you, what's your intention? Duke Shinbei slammed the table with an ugly look on his face. I just think that you shouldn't be wasted like this. The current emperor doesn't want to put you in an important position. Naturally, there will be a wise emperor who can put you in an important position. The man who spoke didn't expect Surgeonbei to have such a reaction. His back was covered with cold sweat and his voice was getting lower and lower. I don't need you to interfere in my affairs. There were people from Minghua in Surgeonbei's residence. Since someone contacted Surgeonbei's residence, the news was passed to Shinyu by Minghua. Shinyu knew everything that happened in Surgeonbei's residence. This time, he made the right decision. Shinyu closed the secret letter and sighed. The Hidden Dragon Guards reported everything that happened in the capital. The Hidden Dragon Guards hid in the dark. They were Shang Junlin's eyes and ears. Whatever they knew, Shang Junlin would know in less than a day. Those people thought that they were doing it secretly, but they didn't know that their every move was being monitored by the Hidden Dragon Guards. After ascending the throne for so many years, Shang Junlin's control over the Great Han dynasty was far beyond these people's imagination. The Hidden Dragon Guards knew what was happening in Surgeonbei's residence. After Shang Junlin received the news from the Hidden Dragon Guards, he told Shinyu, if the Northern Marquis really did those things, I don't know how to deal with him. Shang Junlin heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that Surgeonbei had rejected those people. Surgeonbei was Shinyu's biological father. If he did something unforgivable, as the son of Surgeonbei, Shinyu would be implicated. This was something that Shang Junlin didn't want to see. Your Majesty, you can do whatever you want to do. You don't have to worry about me. Shinyu could tell what Shang Junlin was worried about. Even if EU doesn't care, I won't let the world think that EU has a bad reputation. Even if this bad reputation was because of Surgeonbei. Your Majesty, how do you plan to deal with him? Shinyu's voice was very calm. It was as if they were talking about an irrelevant subject and not his biological father. I can't just let go of what he did to you. However, I can't let him affect you. EU, don't worry. I will take care of it. Or rather, does EU have any thoughts? Shang Junlin caressed Shinyu's face and rubbed his fingers. Your Majesty, you can decide. Shinyu rubbed Shang Junlin's hand back. In his previous life, he didn't have any scruples. Under his manipulation, Surgeonbei lost everything. The power and wealth he wanted were all gone. The more he cared about something, the more Shinyu wouldn't let him get it. In this life, he didn't plan to use the same method to deal with Surgeonbei. Since Shang Junlin asked, it meant that he had made a decision. Shinyu could rest assured and leave this matter to him. With your Majesty, I don't have to worry about anything, Shinyu murmured. Your Majesty will arrange everything, right? Yes. If EU doesn't want to take care of it, you can leave it to me. Shang Junlin lowered his head and kissed Shinyu's neck. He didn't want unimportant people to occupy Shinyu's attention. He didn't care about love or hate. As long as Shinyu had him in her heart, it was enough. It was best if all her attention was on him. This was a thought that Shang Junlin wouldn't say out loud. What's the situation in the capital? After being intimate with Shang Junlin for a while, Shen Yu asked about serious matters. Some of the ministers have sided with the other side. Some of them did it willingly. Some of them had something on the other side, so they had no choice but to take sides. Shang Junyi has now arrived in the capital and met with many of the ministers in private. When the news from the Summer Palace arrives, they will probably take action. Shang Junlin's tone became cold when he mentioned this. Shang Junyi was the 70th prince. When Shang Junlin ascended the throne, Shang Junyi wasn't even 10 years old. His birth mother was a beauty from the common people. She was only favored by the late emperor for a short period of time. Without the support of a strong maternal family, this pair of mother and son didn't have a strong sense of existence. The fief was also a small and inconspicuous place. These princes' fiefs were all sealed by the late emperor in advance because he was afraid that Shang Junlin would kill them all. For a prince like Shang Junyi, who wasn't favored, the late emperor just casually gave him a piece of land. The 17th prince's fief. Shen Yu recalled the information he read a while ago. It seems to be very close to Prince N's fief. It'll take about half a day on horseback. Shang Junlin gave an affirmative answer. Is it true that the 17th prince has the imperial edict left behind by the late emperor? Shen Yu changed the topic and asked another question. The imperial edict was one of the main reasons why the aristocratic families and ministers changed sides. However, the imperial edict was kept secret and no one had seen it with their own eyes. I've asked the hidden dragon guards to search for it secretly, but they couldn't find the imperial edict. Shang Junlin frowned. When he received the news, he had asked the hidden dragon guards to search for it. After a few days, the hidden dragon guards didn't send back any news. It was as if the news was fabricated out of thin air. It can't be fake news. Without seeing the real thing, those ministers shouldn't have believed it so easily. Shen Yu said. Those who could become officials in the imperial court and survive the purges were not stupid. No matter how real the lie was, it couldn't fool everyone. When the emperor ascended the throne, did anything strange happen? Shen Yu believed that the late emperor would leave such a backup plan to guard against Shang Junlin. After all, the late emperor could even leave behind the national treasury and the army. It wasn't strange for him to have another imperial edict. At that time, Shang Junlin recalled the year when he ascended the throne. When he brought the army back to the capital, he didn't receive the rewards that he deserved. Instead, he received the news that the late emperor and his favored ministers were plotting to seize his military power. Shang Junlin didn't want to sit still and wait for his death. He took the initiative to take control of the capital. He entered the palace with a murderous aura. Under the support of his ministers, Shang Junlin reluctantly received the imperial edict from the late emperor. The late emperor was seriously ill and couldn't get out of bed. He was only awake for a limited time every day. He wanted to seize my military power and return me to the time when I was at the mercy of others. However, he didn't know that because of his muddle-headedness, the ministers couldn't stand him anymore. His favored ministers committed all kinds of crimes and angered the public. They were executed by me. No one was on his side. No matter how unwilling he was, he could only issue an imperial edict to succeed me. Not to mention that Shang Junlin was the only legitimate son of the late emperor and should have the position of crown prince. Those princes who had the ability to inherit the throne were all removed. The remaining princes were either not as powerful as Shang Junlin or too young. Other than Shang Junlin, the late emperor had no other choice. A lot of things happened that year. There must be a lot of things that didn't seem right. When it was close to the end of the year, several princes returned to the capital. With the help of Prince Li and Prince An, the imperial family also stood on my side. In order to prevent accidents, I sent people to guard the late emperor, but he didn't leave any imperial edicts. Shen Yu made up his mind to let Ying Hua pay attention to this matter. Shen Yu didn't hide the existence of Ying Hua from Shang Junlin. The man didn't say anything after he found out. He knew that Shen Yu wasn't a weak existence who needed protection. As long as he wanted to, nothing could stop him. It's a pity that the eunuch who was valued by the late emperor was killed. Otherwise, we might be able to get some information from these people. No matter where the imperial edict came from, it won't affect our plan much. Yu is right. Shang Junlin and Shen Yu weren't the only ones who were curious about the whereabouts of this imperial edict. The 17th prince was also very curious. The servants who had been serving him had sworn that this imperial edict existed, but he had never seen it before. The closer it was to the day of the plan, the more uneasy the 17th prince felt. When his brother ascended the throne, although he was young, he still knew what he should know. He didn't think that he could surpass his brother to ascend the throne. It would be a lie to say that he didn't want to. They were both princes. Why could his brother do it but not him? If he didn't have any thoughts about it, he wouldn't be here. Your Highness, it's getting late. Go back to your room and rest. You can only face what's about to happen if you have enough energy. The eunuch who had been serving the 17th prince walked over and helped him put on his coat. The 17th prince looked at the boundless night sky and turned back to his room. Soon, he would be able to appear in this bustling capital. He would become the new owner of this place. Those who had looked down on him in the past would all kneel at his feet. So what if Shang Junlin was powerful? He would be the one to get the throne in the end. After serving the 17th prince to bed, the eunuch left the residence quietly. He reported the 17th prince's every move to the person who was hiding in the dark. And all of this was seen by the hidden dragon guards. After reading the secret letter from the hidden dragon guards, Shen Yu supported his chin with one hand and looked at the 17th prince mockingly. He thinks that he is the final winner. But he doesn't know that his every move was planned by someone else. Should I say that the 17th prince is too arrogant, or should I say that he is too stupid? He thinks that he can compete with His Majesty. Isn't he overestimating himself? Am I that powerful in Yu's eyes? Shang Junlin took the secret letter from Shen Yu's hand and put it aside. He walked over to Shen Yu and sat down beside her. Shen Yu moved to the side and made room for Shang Junlin. He smiled and said, "Of course Your Majesty is powerful. If you are not powerful, how can I stay by your side willingly?" "Oh." Shang Junlin pinched Shen Yu's chin and said, "Yu, tell me, how am I powerful?" "Of course, I am powerful in every way." "Does that include in bed?" Shen Yu was caught off guard by the man's straightforwardness. Chapter 239. Shang Junlin stared at Shen Yu. Under his gaze, the young man's snow-like skin gradually turned crimson. "Why isn't Yu speaking?" Shang Junlin's lips curled up slightly as he leaned close to the young man's ear. His voice was low and elegant, making it hard for people to imagine that he was asking such a frivolous question. "Your Majesty, why?" Shen Yu's voice paused as he felt his earlobe being bitten. Shang Junlin let go of his earlobe that had been bullied, and let out a low chuckle. His hot breath sprayed on the sensitive earlobe, and the crimson color on the white snow became even more intense. "Why isn't Yu answering my question?" Shang Junlin picked up Shen Yu's hair that had fallen by her ear and twirled it around his finger. "Wasn't Yu the one who said it in the beginning?" Her hair was soft and fragrant. "I was the one who said it. Your Majesty is amazing in every aspect, including in bed." Shen Yu tilted his head, and his soft lips rubbed against Shang Junlin's finger. His eyes sparkled as he slowly uttered the last two words, amazing. Shinyu suddenly felt a slight pain, but he didn't care about the pain. Instead, he raised his hand and stroked the man's face. Shinyu's body temperature had always been low. Even if he removed the band in his body, this physique didn't change. His slightly cold fingers didn't cool down the man's body. Instead, it was like a spark falling into dry wood, igniting a raging fire. Feeling the man's heavy breathing, Shinyu smiled. Your Majesty, didn't you want to hear my answer? I'll answer, oh. Without waiting for him to finish, Shang Junlin had already lowered his head and blocked the young man's opening and closing lips. Shinyu didn't resist. He put his hands around the man's neck and pulled him towards himself. He had never resisted Shang Junlin's kiss, or rather, he was addicted to this kind of intimacy. Under the candlelight, his vision was blurred, and the light and shadow were scattered. The man picked up the black hair that fell by his neck, put it to his lips, and kissed it lovingly. You, tell me, am I powerful? Shinyu clutched the cloth under his hand tightly. His breath was hot, and he could only nod. After the wind and rain stopped, Shinyu lay in Shang Junlin's arms. Her whole body was soft, and she was too lazy to move. It could only be said that people's ability to adapt was extremely strong. Compared to the beginning, Shinyu's discomfort was much lower now. After closing his eyes for a while, Shinyu said, Your Majesty, please give me a massage. Shang Junlin was very familiar with massaging Shinyu. He reached out and massaged Shinyu with moderate strength. Do you feel any discomfort? Shang Junlin asked in a low voice. Shinyu shook his head. Actually, he didn't feel too bad. He just wanted to order Shang Junlin around. The two stopped talking, and the atmosphere around them was warm. The attendant was ordered to bring warm water. Shang Junlin got up, poured a cup of hot water, and came back with it. He pulled Shinyu into his arms again. Drink some water to moisten your throat. Shinyu lowered his head and drank the water in Shang Junlin's hand. How is General Gu? Why did you mention another man at this time? Shang Junlin put the cup on the small table, and his tone was a little dissatisfied. He wasn't dissatisfied with Shinyu, but with General Gu, who took Shinyu's attention at this time. I was talking business with Your Majesty. Who asked Your Majesty to? Shinyu didn't finish the rest of his words, but both of them knew what he was going to say. It's my fault. The man who was satisfied was easy to talk to. You is so attractive. I never have any self-control in front of you. Is Your Majesty blaming me? Shinyu looked at the man from the corner of his eyes, and the corners of his eyes slightly drooped. How can I bear to blame you? If it's my fault, it's my lack of self-control. Good you, don't be angry with me. Shang Junlin intimately rubbed the cheek of the person in his arms, and his tone was full of love. Shinyu naturally wouldn't be angry because of such a small matter. The more attractive he was to Shang Junlin, the deeper Shang Junlin loved him. Shinyu liked the feeling of being needed. I won't be angry with Your Majesty. Shinyu kissed Shang Junlin's face. Your Majesty, let's talk business. Shang Junlin and Shinyu talked business. Gu Huai incorporated the army of the Lin family, and killed the people who were hiding in the mountains to take advantage of the situation. They are now on their way to the capital. Shinyu, such a big movement. Has the person behind the scenes received the news? Shang Junlin, the news hasn't arrived yet. Gu Huai acted very quickly and caught the other party off guard, not giving the other party a chance to report. Previously, Gu Huai acted to let those people think that the plan was developing according to their expectations. Now that the person's attention is on the capital, they won't spend too much energy on Gu Huai. When those people react, everything will have been settled, and it will be impossible to change anything. Shinyu, the imperial court has sent people to the temporary imperial residence. How is the situation there? Shang Junlin, Fang Jun can handle it. I've sent people to support, so there won't be any problems. The situation in the temporary imperial residence wasn't as bad as the ministers thought. In order to get rid of Shang Junlin, the person behind the scenes sent elite men of sacrifice to assassinate him. In addition, a large number of soldiers were sent to surround the temporary imperial residence, not allowing anyone to enter or leave. There were even many people from the other party in the temporary imperial residence. It had to be said that the person behind the scenes was well prepared. If Shang Junlin hadn't planned this from the beginning, Shang Junlin would have suffered heavy losses. However, Shang Junlin was already prepared. It seemed that he didn't bring many people to the temporary imperial residence, but in fact, he arranged for soldiers and horses to be on standby in the dark. At the beginning, they wouldn't make any movements, giving the other party the illusion that the plan was going smoothly. When Shang Junlin gave the order, they would be like ghosts on the battlefield, mercilessly reaping the lives of the enemies. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. The winner who thought that he was the oriole didn't know that he had already fallen into the hunter's trap. Count North dealt with the confidant who instigated him. After Shen Yu told someone to leak the news to Count North that the confidant had another master, Count North. After knowing the betrayal of his confidant, Count North was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. At the same time, he also felt that under the seemingly calm surface of the capital, a shocking storm was brewing. He couldn't help but think that he had been bewitched by his confidant. What about the other ministers? Were there people lurking around them to lure them into the abyss? Now in the capital, how many people were bewitched? What about His Majesty? Did he know that someone wanted to make a move in the capital? At such a critical moment, what should he do? No one could give him a definite and feasible answer. As time passed, the uneasiness in the imperial court grew. After the general sent to the temporary imperial residence entered the southern border, he suddenly lost contact with the imperial court. This time, the ministers who were hoping for a fluke also knew that something was going to happen. On a drizzling morning, the ministers who had a say in the imperial court all received an invitation letter. The invitation letter was from one of the cabinet ministers, Lord Duan, inviting them to have a chat, saying that there was something important to discuss. At the same time, an inconspicuous gray pigeon flew out of the city. The officials tidied themselves up and went to the place mentioned in the letter. On the way, they met familiar officials and couldn't help but talk to them. Lord Duan suddenly summoned us. Is there news about His Majesty? I'm not sure. Let's go and see. It's been so many days, but there's still no news from His Majesty. It's impossible not to worry. After arriving, the officials found that there were a lot of people. The sharp-minded ones faintly felt that some of the officials were different from others. I don't know why Lord Duan invited us here. Seeing Lord Duan come in, the Prime Minister took the lead to speak. Prime Minister, don't worry. After speaking, Lord Duan faced the officials and said in a deep voice, Today, I invited everyone here for the national affairs. The country can't be without a ruler. Now there's no news about His Majesty, we can't just sit and wait. What do you mean, Lord Duan? The Prime Minister's face darkened. His Majesty has no children. If there's an accident, will everyone continue to be like this? As soon as he finished speaking, there was a burst of hushed discussion in the hall. Lord Duan is so bold. His Majesty's whereabouts are unknown, but no one can be sure that something has happened to His Majesty. Is Lord Duan so impatient to do something? It's not that I want to do anything, but it's just a precaution. Otherwise, it's impossible for such a big country to be without a ruler. Don't you think so, Prime Minister? How could the officials not know what Lord Duan was planning by inviting them here? They just couldn't believe it. How could Lord Duan be so bold? Was all of this premeditated? Was the loss of contact between the imperial palace and the imperial court deliberately caused by someone? Is Lord Duan planning to rebel? Another official beside the Prime Minister asked. These words could be said to be quite impolite. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere in the hall was stifling. The hearts of the officials were almost in their throats. They didn't expect someone to say it out loud while they were still guessing. You can't say such things casually. Lord Duan's expression didn't change. I'm just asking for everyone's opinion. What if we don't agree? One of the officials asked with a stiff neck. Lord Zhou's youngest son seems to have just started learning to speak. He's white and chubby, very cute. He's so young. If something happens to him, it'll be a pity. Don't you think so, Lord Zhou? Some of the officials stood behind Lord Duan, and the one who spoke was one of them. Lord Zhou's expression was very ugly. Hearing this, how could the officials not understand that this was a hongmen banquet? Many officials tried to leave, but they didn't expect that before they could walk out of the main door, the imperial guards who had appeared out of nowhere forced them back. Ministers, there is no harm in thinking about it. Even if it's not for yourself, you have to think about it for your family. We are all colleagues, and no one wants to go too far. That person looked at his colleagues who were in a difficult situation and smiled. What do you want to do? Lord Zhou gritted his teeth. Why can you order the imperial guards around? I just want you all to think about what to do. The Prime Minister reached out to stop Lord Zhou, who wanted to say something. Like you said, His Majesty doesn't have an heir. Who do you want to temporarily govern the country? His Majesty doesn't have an heir, but he has a brother who is also the son of the previous emperor. The 17th prince can take on this responsibility. Lord Duan said lightly. And the 17th prince has the imperial edict left by the previous emperor. How is that possible? Genius 1 second. Remember this website, www.biku50. CC Literature Mobile Version Reading Website, Biku50. CC. Chapter 240. What do you mean by the imperial edict? The Prime Minister asked. Do you think it's true just because you say so? If you don't show it to us, how can we believe you? Another official standing behind the Prime Minister said. Lord Duan said calmly, when the time is right, you will naturally see the imperial edict. What do you think of my suggestion? Even if we agree, His Highness isn't in the capital. Instead of wasting time going back and forth, it's better to search for His Majesty. It's not that we don't want to, but His Highness can't be compared to His Majesty in any way. In the side hall, Shang Junyi, who was being talked about, silently clenched his fists that were hidden in his sleeves. He knew that he couldn't compare to Shang Junlin, but being belittled so openly still made him feel suffocated in his chest, neither up nor down. Your Highness. The eunuch next to him whispered. It's nothing. Shang Junyi suppressed his complicated emotions and tried his best to calm down. So what if Shang Junlin was powerful? The final victory would still be his. The quarrel in the main hall continued, and the fists in Shang Junyi's sleeves clenched tighter and tighter. He had never thought of this position, but someone had placed the opportunity in front of him. Almost no one could resist such a great temptation. Just like those people said, they were both children of the previous emperor. Why could Shang Junlin do it but not him? Shang Junyi straightened his clothes and walked into the main hall under the protection of the guards. As expected, he saw the shock on the official's face. This is a premeditated. Before the official could finish, the guards who came in with Shang Junyi suddenly blocked his mouth and pulled him out. The sharp weapons were pointed at the officials led by the Prime Minister. The meaning was clear: if you don't listen, don't blame the weapons for being blind. The main hall instantly fell silent. Even though they had already predicted this, when it really came to this moment, the officials still felt very conflicted. Other than their own safety, they were more worried about the safety of their families. If the other party could use his son to threaten Lord Zhou, then what about their families? Under the threat of force, they didn't dare to do anything. Don't worry, my lords. As long as you do as we say, you and your families will be fine. Shang Junyi stood in front of Lord Duan and comforted him. It would have been better if he hadn't spoken. Once he did, the minister's anger, which they had nowhere to vent, was directed at him. In your dreams. The officials present were clearly divided into two factions. One faction was led by Lord Duan, who followed behind Shang Junyi. The other faction was led by the Prime Minister, who was surrounded in the middle by the guards. The latter was the majority, and they were all important officials of Shang Junlin. Master Duan, what should we do now? Shang Junyi asked when they arrived at the side hall. We can't let this drag on for too long. If the people outside realize that something is wrong, the situation will be very unfavorable for us, Master Duan said. Shang Junyi was perplexed. But isn't the Imperial Army under our command? Other than the Imperial Army, there are other garrisons in the capital. Besides, the Imperial Army doesn't only listen to our orders. There was one more thing that Lord Duan didn't mention. Even though the Imperial Army seemed to be under their command, it was actually under someone else's command. Lord Duan had tried asking Shang Junyi about the identity of the mastermind behind the Imperial Army, but even Shang Junyi himself didn't know. After a few fruitless attempts, he could only put the matter aside for the time being. At the moment, only a portion of the Imperial Army was under their command. The other portion was being held back, and it wouldn't pose a hindrance to their plans for the time being. However, that didn't mean that it wouldn't be for the time being. They had to end the battle quickly so that those people wouldn't be able to do anything once the dust settled. How many families do we have in our hands now? Shang Junyi knew this as well. He didn't expect to be able to make these officials listen to him with just a little threat. They had made preparations for both sides. These people might be able to disregard their own lives for the sake of the greater good, but what about their wives and children? How could they not care at all? Not many. Other than Lord Zhou's family, there are less than 10 families under our control. It wasn't easy to control the families of these officials. They had too few people at their disposal. If not for the lack of news from Shang Junlin and the instability of the people in the capital, they wouldn't have been able to do much. Both sides were in a stalemate for the time being. The officials were confined to the main hall and guarded by armed guards. They couldn't do anything because they were worried about their wives and children. After dealing with Shang Junyi, Lord Duan went to the study. There was already someone waiting for him. It was the man who had come to his residence to seek cooperation. Lord Duan walked in and asked, "The plan has been going on for so long. Is your master still unwilling to show himself?" Yes, from the beginning until now, he had only been communicating with this man. The real mastermind had never shown himself. You have seen my sincerity. Isn't it time for you to show some sincerity? I don't want my collaborator to be a coward who doesn't even want to show his face. Lord Duan, why are you in such a hurry? Isn't this prince here? A voice came from behind him. Master Duan's body tensed up instinctively. He turned around and saw a masked face. The man slowly took off his mask. It's you. Lord Duan's eyes widened. The person who had appeared before him was completely out of his expectations. You seem surprised to see me, Lord Duan. The man placed the mask on the table. I just don't understand why your Royal Highness would go through so much trouble to push a young boy to the throne. Lord Duan calmly suppressed his shock. Your Royal Highness, King, and everyone wants to sit on that throne, but not me. I can feel your sincerity. Once this is done, I will fulfill my promise to you. To be honest, Kingnan was also in disbelief at Lord Duan's actions. He didn't expect him to be able to capture all the influential officials in the imperial court. Things were progressing more smoothly than he had expected. Everyone is here. What does your Royal Highness plan to do next? There's no hurry. Kingnan clapped his hands. A servant in black carried a wooden box in. The box was placed in front of Lord Duan. This is. Lord Duan, why don't you open it and take a look? Kingnan looked at him calmly. Lord Duan took 2 steps forward and slowly opened the wooden box under King Anne's watchful gaze. His movements suddenly stopped. He stared at the thing in the box. He couldn't find his voice for a long time. An imperial edict was quietly placed in the wooden box. Lord Duan took out the imperial edict with mixed feelings. He couldn't help but ask, is this real? I believe that Lord Duan has the ability to distinguish between real and fake. Lord Duan didn't even realize that at this moment, his hands were trembling. They had always doubted the authenticity of this imperial edict. They never thought that it would fall into his hands. He had been an official for many years. Now that he was a cabinet minister, he could naturally distinguish whether an imperial edict was real or fake. Because of this, he found it even more inconceivable. This imperial edict was real. There was no doubt about this. But, how could it be? Why would Kingnan have such an imperial edict? What was even more inconceivable was that this was an imperial edict for ascension. With it in your hands, I don't need to say more. Lord Duan should know what to do, right? Seeing Lord Duan's dazed expression, Kingnan reminded him. In the hall, the ministers gathered together. Several hours had passed, but nothing happened. Shang Junlin received a secret letter from the capital. He said to Xinyu, who was standing beside him, "It has begun." The place where they were staying now was very close to the capital. They could enter the city in less than 2 hours. The Imperial Guards who were trapped by the trap had already contacted them. The leader of the Imperial Guards brought the recent movements in the capital. When he was transferred out of the capital for no reason, he faintly felt that something was wrong. Now that he saw with his own eyes that Shang Junlin and Xinyu were safe, he was relieved. Lady Zhou fainted on the way to burn incense. When she woke up, she found that she was in a completely unfamiliar place. She was locked up with several other ministers' wives. Her first reaction was to find her child. This time, she burned incense to pray for her youngest son, so she brought her child along. Fortunately, the child was by her side. She could reach out and grab him. She hugged the child in her arms. Her high-hanging heart finally relaxed a little. Seeing that she had woken up, one of the wives put a finger to her lips and made a gesture to keep quiet. Lady Zhou was not a foolish woman. When she saw this, she lowered her voice and asked, "What's going on?" One after another, the others woke up. After a brief conversation, they found that everyone had suddenly fainted and was brought here. "I'm afraid that they want to use us to threaten our families." Almost instantly, they figured out the cause and effect. "There are so many of us. The person who caught us must have a big plan." The others nodded. They checked themselves and found that they were not injured or tied up. They walked around the room and found that the doors and windows were tightly shut. There were many people guarding outside. The people in the room were all women. Except for Lady Zhou, there was a 1-year-old child beside her. The child was still in a coma. The wife who knew a little about medicine checked the child. It was just that the child had fallen asleep because of the medicine. "We can't let the adults be threatened because of us." Lady Zhou held the child and said in a deep voice. The other women agreed. "We have to think of a way to escape." They were just weak women. It was very difficult to escape from a heavily guarded place. How to get out of this room became their top priority. Unfortunately, no matter if they threatened or gave in, the people outside were unmoved. Only when they made the most noise, they threatened, "If you want to get out in one piece, stay here quietly." After a while, the sky was dark. There were no candles in the room, so it was dark. The night was the easiest to breed fear. The wives huddled together and comforted each other. Every quarter of an hour became extremely unbearable. After some time, a few drunk men barged in. The moonlight shone in through the open door, bringing with it despair. "What do you want to do? What do we want to do?" The man laughed. "There are so many beauties here. After these 2 days, we don't even know if we can survive. Why don't we let our brothers have some fun first?" After saying that, they pounced on them. The women who had been hungry for a day were no match for these people. Seeing that they could not resist, one of them pulled out a hairpin and stabbed forward. Even if they died, they would drag these people down with them. In a moment of carelessness, the man who pounced on them was stabbed in the neck. The stinging pain made the man sober up for a moment, followed by rising anger. Slap, the hairpin was knocked away. The man held the woman's hand tightly. "Don't be so shameless. Go away." Madame Jo held the child and kept shrinking back. The man stepped forward. "If you don't listen, throw the child away. If you listen, our brothers might be happy and let you go after this matter is over." Of course, these words were used to deceive these women. They all knew what would happen to these women after this matter was over. If not, they would not dare to use their drunken guts to do something bad. These people were temporarily recruited. Usually, they liked to bully the weak by relying on their strength. They were sent to watch over these women. Once the matter was settled, they would directly kill them. Not only these women, but the women's husbands would also be the first to be dealt with. Madame Jo's eyes were filled with despair. She closed her eyes and thought, "Even if I die, I will make you pay." She had already made up her mind. Even if she could not change anything, even if she had to pay a heavy price, she would not let this man have an easy time. The men were very strong. After drinking, they let go of the last shackle in their hearts. They were not good people. Usually, they would not even see these beautiful women. Now that so many of them came back, they were destined to be killed. If they did not do something, they would feel sorry for themselves. The man smiled maliciously and approached. The smell of alcohol mixed with the body odor made people want to vomit. She clenched her fists tightly and dug her nails into her palms. She could not feel any pain. At the critical moment, a cold arrow came from outside the door and went straight into the man's back. Madame Jo was stunned for a moment. She loosened her clenched fists and slowly felt the pain. The man groaned and fell straight down. Madame Jo pushed the man aside and looked outside the door. The others also felt that something was wrong. They stopped what they were doing and turned around. They said fiercely, "Who dares to ruin our business?" A young man in white stood outside the door and pulled the bowstring. A group of trash who only know how to bully women. Living in this world is a waste of food. 3 arrows were shot at the same time. 3 people fell down with a groan. The other women who were frightened also noticed the people outside the door. They looked over. Genius 1 second. Remember this website, www.biku50. CC Literature Mobile Version Reading Website, biku50. CC. Chapter 241. There were 6 people who came in with him. 4 of them were knocked down in an instant, and the remaining 2 were mostly sober. Shinyu put an arrow on his bow and aimed at one of them. "Who the hell are you?" It was no wonder that they couldn't recognize Shinyu. In this life, before entering the palace, Shinyu's activities were fixed. After entering the palace, there were even fewer people who could see him. After a while, the two of them realized that something was wrong. They weren't the only ones guarding this place. Although he found an excuse to send the rest of the people away, they shouldn't have made such a big noise without any response. You don't deserve to know my name. Shinyu was too lazy to talk nonsense with these people. He released his fingers, and the arrow flew like a meteor. The person who spoke covered his chest and fell down. Shinyu put an arrow on his bow again and aimed at the remaining man. The man was scared out of his wits by the scene in front of him. He suddenly knelt down. "Lord, please spare my life. This lowly one was possessed. This lowly one won't dare to do it again. Please spare my life." Shinyu narrowed his eyes, lowered his arm, and aimed at the remaining man again. The man swallowed his saliva. Cold sweat soaked his clothes, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He kowtowed heavily. "This lowly one is willing to say anything. Please spare my life." In the silence, the sudden sound of chaotic footsteps was very obvious. Could it be that their people were here? The man's heart was filled with joy. When the madams heard the footsteps getting closer and closer, their faces became paler and paler. They didn't know whether the young man who came to save them came alone or with helpers. They also didn't know whether the young man could deal with those people. "Lord, you have to be careful." The madams recovered from the panic and slowly gathered together. Everything that happened today had a huge impact on them. They had been kidnapped for such a long time. Even if they were rescued, they would have to face all kinds of problems. At the same time, they also knew that now was not the time to think about these things. The most important thing now was to get rid of the people here and then escape. What? The child in Madame Zhou's arms suddenly woke up and cried loudly. Madame Zhou hurriedly held the child and coaxed him. The footsteps were getting closer. Everyone's spirits were high, except for Shinyu. From the beginning to the end, the expression on his face didn't change. Under his influence, the madams also gradually calmed down. They knew that at this time, there was no use in being anxious. "My lord, the traitors have all been executed." Amidst the silence, the sound of footsteps approached. It was a group of burly soldiers in armor. The leader of the group knelt down respectfully in front of the young man. The madams covered their mouths and wept with joy. At this moment, they clearly realized that they had been saved. The man kneeling on the ground had completely sobered up from his drunkenness. He looked at the scene in front of him in disbelief. He thought that the people who came would be on his side. Who would have thought that they were people who followed the young man's orders? When did such a person appear in the capital? Why didn't he have any recollection of it? "I'll take you to a safe place." Shinyu put away his bow and said to the madams who were huddled together. The soldiers entered in an orderly manner and dragged away the people who were shot by Shinyu. The only ones who were not injured saw that the situation was over and were taken away without any resistance. Surrounded by soldiers, the ladies walked out of the nightmarish room. Outside the room, the moonlight was bright. The moonlight sprinkled down and coated the world with a layer of cold brilliance. Outside the room, it was quiet. The smell of blood lingered. It was not difficult to guess what kind of fight had happened not long ago. Along the way, they did not encounter any obstacles. This courtyard was on the edge of the capital. It was not very eye-catching. After going out, they did not enter the capital. Instead, they took another road. There are changes in the capital. First, I will put you in another courtyard. Rest assured, there are guards here. There will be no problem. Shinyu took these women to another courtyard in the suburbs of the capital. Few people knew about this place, so it would not be affected by the turmoil in the capital. When the matter was over, he would send them back. As for those men who tried to offend them, Shin Yu would ensure that they would never tell this secret. Madams, please have a good rest. It will be over soon. Today's matter will not be known by anyone. When he went to rescue them, Shin Yu felt that something was wrong. He let the others stay outside to deal with the enemy. He went to the place where the madams were held. Things were as he expected. He did not say anything and directly shot 5 of them. At the same time, he was glad that he came in time. If something really happened, the consequences would be unimaginable. After dealing with this matter, he let the others come over. These soldiers were part of the Imperial Guards and part of them were the Hidden Dragon Guards. Shang Junlin needed to go to the palace to deal with more important matters. Thus, he left this place to him. Shin Yu still had other things to do. After giving instructions to the people in the courtyard, he left. Their tense minds relaxed. However, the madams did not feel sleepy. After this matter, everyone became closer. I wonder who saved us. After this matter, we must pay a visit to thank him. One of the madams said. They were all young women. Some of them were the daughters-in-law of the officials. They had not attended the palace banquet before. Thus, they did not know Shin Yu. Of course, there were some who recognized him. Madame Zhou was one of them. At that time, the situation was too chaotic. She did not recognize Shin Yu immediately. After she recognized him, she saw the soldiers calling him Lord. Thus, she did not say it out loud. Her gaze swept across the faces of everyone present. Obviously, she was not the only one who recognized him. They tacitly did not say it out loud. They only remembered this kindness in their hearts. Shin Yu sent a letter to the families of these women to inform them that they were safe. Now, let's go to the palace. Shin Yu rode on the horse and said. Shin Yu and Shang Junlin guessed that these people would eventually go to the palace. In fact, the people from Yinghua who stayed in the capital sent a message to Shin Yu. The palace was brightly lit, but this time was different from the previous times. The movements of the palace servants were restricted, and those who disobeyed or tried to escape were killed directly. The guards guarding the palace were facing the invading enemies, and were forced to retreat step by step. No coup could avoid bloodshed. The palace had no master. The enemy's morale was high. They quickly occupied the place that symbolized the peak of power in Dahuan. Shang Junyi was welcomed into the palace. The smell of blood filled his nose. The corpses that were not dealt with in time were piled up on the roadside. If it were any other time, Shang Junyi might be afraid. However, at this moment, he was only excited. After today, he would become the new master of Dahuan. This palace would belong to him from now on. Beauties, wealth, power, they would all be at his fingertips. Shang Junyi was worried that a long delay would lead to trouble. After receiving the imperial edict, he ordered the imperial guards to escort the ministers to the palace. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, the ministers were blindfolded along the way. When the blindfold was removed, the ministers found themselves in the main hall where they usually attended court. They saw Lord Duan and other officials standing in front of them. They saw the 17th prince standing beside Lord Duan. They also saw someone who should not be here, His Highness Kingin. The hearts of the ministers sank. Is the 17th prince determined to rebel? Lord Shou sneered. Don't say it so harshly. Shang Junyi raised his hand. Why don't you take a look at what this is? A young eunuch came forward with a brocade box. Under Shang Junyi's command, he opened the box and took out the imperial edict. Read. The young eunuch read the contents of the edict loudly. An imperial edict to pass on the throne. What did you do to His Majesty? You bastard! Hand over His Majesty. No one thought that the imperial edict was left behind by the previous emperor. Their first reaction was that His Majesty had fallen into the hands of these people and was forced to write an imperial edict. This is not left behind by Shang Junlin. This is an imperial edict left behind by my father. Even Shang Junlin has to listen to my father's orders, right? Shang Junyi looked at the ministers below him. He could not hide his excitement. He also did not expect such an imperial edict to exist. Lord Duan told him that this imperial edict had been kept by King An until today. Previously, Shang Junlin was too powerful for them to do anything. Now was the best opportunity. What opportunity? Of course, it was the opportunity to take back what was rightfully his. Shang Junyi, who was overwhelmed with joy, did not think too deeply about the details. He did not care about these things. No matter what kind of conspiracy there was, once he ascended the throne, he could promote his own people and develop his own power, just like Shang Junlin. He was the emperor and everyone should be loyal to him. In the end, he would be the one in power. May I know why His Highness King An is here? The Prime Minister broke the silence. Royal Uncle is in charge of the imperial edict. Royal Uncle has always been close to my father. You should believe his words, right? It was no secret that King An and the previous emperor were close. Even when the previous emperor was at his sickest, King An could enter and leave the palace as he pleased. From this, it could be seen that the previous emperor did not guard against him. Seeing the suspicion in their eyes, Shang Junyi ordered a young eunuch to bring the imperial edict to them to verify its authenticity. The ministers touched the edict and put down their hands. Their eyes were filled with complex emotions. The imperial edict is real. Other than the imperial jade seal, there was also the previous emperor's personal seal on the imperial edict. These two things could not be faked. But, even if it was real, so what? They only recognized Shang Junlin's identity as the emperor. The 17th prince is not from the main palace. Even if there is an imperial edict, we will not agree. His Majesty's whereabouts are unknown. We should protect the Great Huan dynasty for His Majesty and prevent it from being taken away by some rascal. Exactly. Shang Junyi was dumbfounded. He never thought that the outcome would be like this. He thought that after seeing the imperial edict, the ministers would have to accept it no matter how unwilling they were. He had already thought about it. When he ascended the throne, he would replace these stubborn ministers. He turned his head to look at Prince An, only to see that the prince was still as calm as ever. King An was not surprised by this. If the imperial edict could turn the situation around, he would not have waited so long and planned so much before taking it out. Only Shang Junyi would naively think that this imperial edict would be of great use. Of course, it was not completely useless. It was just that after the deed was done, everything they did would be justified. It would be convenient to shut the mouths of the people. It was impossible to use this imperial edict to make the ministers who were loyal to Shang Junlin bow their heads. King An was well aware of this, but he did not tell Shang Junyi. He originally thought that Shang Junyi would be able to think of this, but he had overestimated him. After all, how much political awareness could a prince who was not favored since young have? If it was not for the fact that this was the only one that could be used, King An would not have pushed an idiot into the throne. However, it was fine as long as the puppet was obedient. The ministers looked righteous. Shang Junyi was furious. What if Shang Junlin is no longer around? Are you going to respect a dead man as your leader? King Yan's men had told him that Shang Junlin was doomed this time. It was impossible for him to return in one piece. The current emperor of the Great Huan dynasty is His Majesty. No matter what secrets are behind this imperial edict, we will only recognize His Majesty. The new emperor can only be appointed by His Majesty. The ministers were unmoved. Although they had only known Shang Junyi for a short while, they could feel the difference between Shang Junyi and His Majesty. The Great Huan dynasty could not be handed over to such a person. Fine, fine. Since you want to die, don't blame me for being merciless. Shang Junyi could feel the unspoken meaning of these people. He was furious. Men, clap, clap, clap. In the tense atmosphere, a sudden clap attracted everyone's attention. They could not help but look in the direction of the sound. They saw a tall man in black standing at the entrance of the hall. He looked into the hall with interest. Genius 1 second. Remember this website, www.biku50. CC Literature Mobile Version Website, Biku50. CC. Chapter 242. The basilica suddenly fell silent. Shang Junyi, who was still talking tough, felt as if someone was strangling him. The rest of his words were stuck in his throat and he could not spit them out. Didn't they say that Shang Junlin was trapped in the imperial residence and had fallen into their hands? Why did he appear here? Didn't they say that the capital city was already under their control? Why was there no news of his appearance? Questions circled in Shang Junyi's mind. He opened his mouth but found that he did not know where to start. Shang Junlin walked step by step. The doors were wide open but there was no movement outside. Logically speaking, this should not be the case. Their people had already taken control of the imperial residence. Otherwise, they would not have brought the officials here. The imperial residence was without a ruler and this was the best time to act. They only needed to wait a little longer until dawn and this matter would be settled. Why? Why now? Shang Junlin appeared. The officials standing behind Shang Junyi changed their expressions several times. After experiencing so many things, their fear of Shang Junlin was engraved in their bones. Now that they saw Shang Junlin, their first reaction was fear. Why did Shang Junlin appear here unscathed? King An looked at the man in black walking step by step. His face darkened. The people he sent to the imperial residence had clearly told him that Shang Junlin was already under their control. Why did this person suddenly appear in the imperial residence? Compared to them, the officials standing beside the prime minister were overjoyed. They were originally promoted by Shang Junlin over the years. Their glory and loss were all related to him. They recognized Shang Junlin as the emperor and recognized his way of doing things. Choices were always two-way. Shang Junlin chose them and they chose him. As mentioned before, compared to Shang Junlin, Shang Junyi was nothing. Now that Shang Junlin had appeared unscathed, the stone in their hearts had also fallen to the ground. Sometimes, it was really strange. Before they saw Shang Junlin, they were prepared to sacrifice their lives at any time. When they saw him, they felt that the situation could be easily reversed. As long as Shang Junlin was here, any problem could be easily solved. Even if the current situation was very unfavorable to them, as long as Shang Junlin appeared, they could easily solve the problem. Your Majesty! A minister could not help but call out. This sound seemed to have pressed a switch, and the silent hall came back to life. Everyone seems to be very surprised to see me in the imperial palace. Shang Junlin deliberately emphasized the word imperial palace. The faces of Shang Junyi and the others turned ugly. How could they not be surprised that someone who absolutely shouldn't be here was here? More than surprise, there was panic. Shang Junlin's attitude was too calm. He was strolling leisurely, as if he couldn't feel the threat around him at all. It was as if he was still the high and mighty ruler, and everyone should bow down to him. The imperial guards in the main hall were intimidated by his aura. They held their swords and did not dare to step forward. Shang Junlin was only one person, but he had the aura of a magnificent army. No one dared to underestimate this emperor who had killed his way out of a mountain of corpses. The clothes on Shang Junyi's back were soaked in cold sweat. Even though he told himself over and over in his heart that even if Shang Junlin appeared, he wouldn't be able to change anything, he still couldn't suppress the fear rising from the bottom of his heart. "Why are you here?" Shang Junyi's brows were tightly knitted. "This question is more appropriate for me to ask. Why are you in the imperial palace? This is not the time for you to appear in the capital, right?" Shang Junlin's hawk-like eyes swept across Shang Junyi and the others. Everyone who met his gaze lowered their heads. Although they had chosen the 17th prince, it did not mean that they were not afraid of Shang Junlin. If the 17th prince had not assured them that Shang Junlin would not appear, some of them would not have dared to do such a thing no matter how much courage they had. They lowered their heads and were extremely vexed. They blamed themselves for being blinded by greed and taking the wrong path. Now that Shang Junlin had returned, it would be fine if they succeeded, but if they failed, they did not dare to think about what awaited them. They must strike first to gain the upper hand. After calming themselves down, one of Shang Junyi's favored ministers walked up to him and whispered, "Your Highness, it's either success or death. Your Highness, you must make a decision quickly." Shang Junlin did not take note of these people's small actions. His gaze wandered around and finally landed on An Wang, who was also dressed in royal attire. "Why is royal uncle here?" "Your Highness, you already know. There's no need to ask." King An's expression did not change. "I just did not expect that the person who did this would be royal uncle." Shang Junlin's eyes flashed with a complicated look for a moment, but he quickly calmed down. While they were talking, there were already a few ministers surrounding Shang Junyi, advising him to hurry up and make a move. Although Shang Junlin's appearance was unexpected, he appeared alone in the main hall. This place was filled with their people, so how could it not be their opportunity? "Your Highness, no matter how strong he is only one person. If he doesn't die today, we will be the ones to die." How could Shang Junyi not know this? After being reminded by the minister, his mind that was too frightened by Shang Junlin's appearance began to work again. He looked down and saw that he was not the only one who was temporarily stunned by Shang Junlin's sudden appearance. The Imperial Guards maintained their original positions. If one looked closely, they would notice that their eyes were lifeless. "Your Highness, please make a decision quickly." Shang Junyi's eyebrows were tightly knitted together. He glanced at the man in black who stood alone in the main hall. Compared to him, the man seemed more like the master of the palace. Of course, up until now, that was indeed the case. However, that would not be the case very soon. "What are you waiting for? Take him down." Shang Junyi pointed at Shang Junlin and said sternly. His arms trembled uncontrollably. He was afraid and agitated. So what if Shang Junlin appeared? Everyone here belonged to him. Compared to disappearing without a reason, wouldn't it be better to be captured by him personally? "How dare you!" The officials standing with the Prime Minister were furious. They did not care about their own safety and were about to rush over. "Don't forget that your families are still in my hands," Shang Junyi kindly reminded them. "You don't care about your own safety, but do you not care about the safety of your wives and children?" Some of the ministers paused. However, it was only for a short while. Not only did they not stop as Shang Junyi wished, but they also resisted even more fiercely. "Even if we die, we will not let a villain like you succeed. Dahuan will be finished if it falls into the hands of someone like you." These people had experienced the darkness of the previous emperor's reign. They clearly knew how important a wise ruler was to the entire country. They had seen with their own eyes how Dahuan had become better under Shang Junlin. They would not allow anyone to destroy it. The Imperial Guards subconsciously wanted to attack the ministers who rushed over, but they were caught off guard and had their throats slit. Even when they fell, they still did not understand why their companions would point their swords at them. The smell of blood filled the hall. The first person to see blood was not the disobedient ministers, nor was it Shang Junlin who suddenly appeared. It was the Imperial Guards who followed Shang Junyi's orders. The ministers were stunned. However, they quickly recovered and continued what they were doing. Ha ha ha, Lord Zhou laughed. Shang Junyi, you didn't expect that even your own people would betray you. Swords had no eyes. People were constantly getting hurt, but no one was afraid. They might argue because of political differences, but at this moment, they were all on the same side. The spearhead was pointed at the enemy led by Shang Junyi. The Imperial Guards in the hall were divided into two groups. One group stood firmly beside Shang Junlin and surrounded him. They pointed their swords at the people who were their allies just a moment ago. In the midst of the chaos, the officials led by the Prime Minister stood firmly behind Shang Junlin. What is the meaning of this? Shang Junyi was so angry that his whole body trembled. This time, it was not because he was afraid, but because he was angry. These people were supposed to listen to his orders. If they were not trustworthy, he would not have used them at this time. Why did they suddenly stand on Shang Junlin's side? Isn't it obvious what I mean? They are the king's soldiers. Naturally, they should listen to the king. A clear voice came from the entrance of the hall with a hint of sarcasm. At the same time, orderly footsteps could be heard. Shang Junyi and the rest looked in the direction of the voice. A young man in white walked in with a smile on his face. Following behind him was a group of guards in black armor who exuded a strong murderous aura. It's the king. Some of the ministers recognized him. Are those the hidden dragon guards behind the king? They were obviously dressed differently from the Imperial Guards. The ministers could not help but think that they were the hidden dragon guards. They knew that Shang Junlin had a group of lethal weapons, but it was their first time seeing it with their own eyes. At this moment, King An's expression changed. At this moment, the tables had turned. The hidden dragon guards behind Xinyu quickly restrained the rebels. Shang Junyi wanted to order the Imperial Guards to resist, but it was futile in the face of the hidden dragon guards. Everyone is here, right? That's great, I don't have to go around capturing people. Xinyu stood beside Shang Junlin. One was dressed in white while the other was dressed in black. In the eyes of Shang Junyi and the rest, they were no different from demons. Shang Junyi and the rest were restrained by the hidden dragon guards and the Imperial Guards, except for Master Duan. Under the astonished gazes of the crowd, Lord Duan walked in front of Shang Junlin and bowed. Your Majesty, this subject is fortunate to have not failed you. Duan Heng, you old dog, did you do this on purpose? One of the ministers who was restrained by Master Duan scolded. The meaning behind Lord Duan's actions was very clear. Shang Junyi and the others' expressions turned even uglier. Shang Junyi struggled to raise his head and looked at Lord Duan, his eyes bulging. No wonder, no wonder. From the beginning to the end, you were pretending to surrender. No wonder Shang Junlin came in such a timely manner. No wonder Shang Junlin's men appeared in the Imperial Army. This prince is still curious. It was clearly a candidate who had been confirmed over and over again. How could someone who shouldn't have entered sneak in? With you in charge of the plan, you can naturally place the Emperor's men inside. Compared to the crazy Shang Junyi, King An was too quiet. Xinyu had been observing him. It was hard to imagine that such a person was behind everything. Wait, Shang Junyi suddenly thought of something and his eyes lit up. All of you are so loyal to Shang Junlin. What if he is not father's son? Would you still think that he is the most suitable person for the position? Genius 1 second. Remember home address, www.bq50. CC Literature Network mobile version reading website, bq50. CC. Chapter 243. You can eat whatever you want, but you can't speak whatever you want. 17th Prince, do you know what you are saying? Of course I know what I am saying. Shang Junyi raised his head. Otherwise, why do you think Imperial Father dislikes his only legitimate son so much? The late Empress and Imperial Father were young and deeply in love. Why did she suddenly fall out of favor and implicate her own family? Shang Junyi's words were like thunder that exploded in everyone's ears. Every word he said was accusing the late Empress of being disloyal to the late Emperor. However, the reason why the late Empress fell out of favor was still very suspicious. After the late Empress fell out of favor, the late Emperor's temperament suddenly changed greatly. Anyone who wanted to investigate this matter deeply lost their official position for various reasons. This kind of abnormal behavior could very well explain some problems. Could it be, as the 17th Prince said, that the late Empress betrayed the late Emperor and caused the late Emperor's temperament to change? Shen Yu stood beside Shang Junlin and clearly felt the man's body tense up for a moment. The hand that was hanging by his side moved to the side and held the hand that was about to clench into a fist. Shang Junlin exuded a cold aura that kept people away. When the back of his hand touched the warmth of another person, the cold aura couldn't help but stagnate. Whether His Majesty is the late Emperor's child or not has long been determined. This is not a reason you can use to attack His Majesty and the late Empress. Do you know what kind of crime it is to slander His Majesty and confuse the imperial bloodline? Shen Yu's words pulled everyone's thoughts back. Yes, there was a result when the blood of the late Emperor was tested. His Majesty was indeed the late Emperor's child. They were almost led into the gutter by Shang Junyi's words. That's right. At that time, there were members of the imperial family who came forward. There is no problem with His Majesty's blood. Is the 17th Prince out of his mind? Do you really think that one sentence can change anything? An old official who stood beside Shang Junlin stood out. How is that possible? Seeing that his words did not have the desired effect, Shang Junyi frantically tried to break free. The guard holding him down did not expect him to suddenly explode with so much strength and was caught off guard for a moment, allowing him to break free. Uncle, isn't this what your people told me? Say that he's not Imperial Father's biological son. I'm the one who's most qualified to sit on that throne. Quickly tell them. Tell them that my words are true. That's right. I did tell you that the late Emperor thought that His Majesty wasn't his biological child, but I didn't say that His Majesty really wasn't the late Emperor's biological child. This sentence was a bit roundabout, but the meaning was very clear. The former Emperor's cold treatment of the former Empress and his dislike of Shang Junlin were all because he felt that the former Empress had betrayed him. The legitimate son that he had loved for many years was not his own. The more he loved her back then, the more hatred he felt after coming to this realization. But why would the previous emperor feel this way out of nowhere? At this moment, the scribe reacted to the situation and quickly grabbed Shang Junyi, who had rushed in front of Prince En. However, the impact of his actions did not disappear immediately. Everyone's gaze involuntarily fell on Prince En, who was also restrained. What kind of role did Prince En play in this matter? From what the 17th Prince said, it was Prince En who told him about this. Why did he do this? Also, the imperial decree from before seemed to have been taken out by Prince En. Why would Prince En have such an imperial decree? Where did he get it from? Also, what role did Prince En play in the matter of the former Empress? Even though he was in the center of everyone's attention, Prince En's expression did not change. He even smiled strangely. Do you think that it's over now? You're already a prisoner. What else can you do? The Minister of Revenue did not have a good impression of Prince and who liked to cause trouble. Just look at how much money he had wasted from the national treasury. Master Duan has always been His Majesty's man. I did not expect this. However, I did not tell Master Duan everything about my plan. Master Duan can change the people in the Imperial Guards. What about the people outside the capital city? When the sun rises, regardless of whether my plan succeeds or not, they will still attack the capital city. Even if His Majesty has the Imperial Guards and the Hidden Dragon Guards, what can they do in the face of an army of 300,000 soldiers? The faces of the officials changed. The capital city did not have so many guards. If what Prince An said was true and there were 300,000 soldiers waiting outside the capital city, it was definitely not good news for them. Now that you're in our hands, won't those people hesitate to attack? The Prime Minister asked. I won't allow it. Their enemy is the Imperial Court. Even I can't stop them. Prince An smiled. If your plan succeeds, these people will still attack the capital city. Xin Yu frowned. That's right. Prince An replied. It was obvious that Prince An did not care about his own life. His goal was not just to seize the throne, but to destroy the imperial court. This answer not only shocked the officials on Shang Junlin's side, but also the officials who supported Shang Junyi. Prince An's words revealed too much information. These officials did not dare to imagine what would happen if the capital city was attacked while they were celebrating their success. What are you trying to do? This time, the one who asked was one of the officials who supported Shang Junyi. Prince An felt the anger of the officials who surrendered and comforted them. Don't worry. If we win, the 300,000 soldiers will not do anything they shouldn't do. Otherwise, he did not say what would happen, but everyone knew what he meant. It was almost dawn. It was getting closer and closer to the time Prince An mentioned. Silence spread. Even though they did not sleep for the entire night, no one felt sleepy. Too many things happened today. They thought that Shang Junlin's timely appearance would have solved the problem. They did not expect Prince An to have such a backup plan. Some of the soldiers in the capital city were sent out to search for the missing emperor. It was also at this time that they realized why the officials who supported Shang Junyi previously suggested sending out a large number of soldiers to search for the emperor. It was because Prince An wanted to empty the capital city's garrison army. Your Majesty, I'm willing to lead the soldiers. As long as I'm here, I won't let anyone who shouldn't enter the capital city. In the silence, a young military official stood up. I'm willing too. I'm also. After the first person spoke, more and more people stood up. Among these people, not all of them were military generals. Even if they knew that they might not be able to come back, in this moment of life and death, they were still willing to contribute their last bit of strength. In the blink of an eye, there were people kneeling on the ground. No need. This situation was out of Shang Junlin's expectation. He looked at the officials kneeling on the ground with a complicated expression. I'll handle it well. Xin Yu looked at this scene and was slightly relieved. This life was different from the previous one. The one who won the hearts of the people was Shang Junlin, not some opportunistic person. The sun rose slowly and the sunlight dispersed the darkness. Everyone was extremely nervous. Xin Yu stood beside Shang Junlin. At this moment, no one spoke. They were all waiting. They were waiting for an outcome that they did not know whether it was good or bad. Every moment of waiting was torture. Whether it was for the officials who stood on Shang Junlin's side or for Shang Junyi and the others, it was the same. After some time, they heard the sound of footsteps. It was neat and orderly. There was no sense of chaos. The footsteps became clearer and clearer. Their hearts were almost in their throats. The Imperial Guards and Hidden Dragon Guards surrounded Shang Junlin, Shen Yu, and the other officials in the middle. They were ready to fight. The door of the basilica was not closed. Everyone's attention was focused on the door. As the footsteps got closer, they saw a figure in armor. It was getting closer. The figure of the leader became clearer. It was Gu Huai, General Gu. Gu Huai walked in front of Shang Junlin and knelt down respectfully. "Your Majesty, please forgive me for being late." The Imperial Guard leader who came in late also knelt down. "Your Majesty, the traitors have been executed." The officials heaved a sigh of relief. Their hearts that were in their throats were now at ease. The dust had settled. King An did not see the people he arranged for. What he received was news that his plan had completely failed. Since the people who came were Shang Junlin's people, it meant that his people had been taken care of. He had underestimated his nephew. It seemed that he had planned everything perfectly, but in reality, his opponent had seen through every step. "Take the people away," Shang Junlin ordered. The Imperial Guards dragged the people away. What is going on?" An old official was confused by the series of twists and turns. He could not help but ask. "I sensed Prince An's movements, so I played along and arranged a show to frighten my beloved subjects." "Your Majesty is fine. The traitors' plan did not succeed. This is the best outcome. Prime Minister, you are right." The crisis was resolved. The atmosphere in the basilica was relaxed. At this moment, the officials' natural fear of Shang Junlin was reduced. What rose in their hearts was deep respect. As officials, they did not live in vain to have such a king. It was De Huan's fortune to have such a king. Shen Yu ordered the imperial kitchen to prepare food and comfort the frightened officials. After a good rest, there were still many things for them to deal with. "Your Majesty, the wives and children of my colleagues are still in the hands of the traitors. I wonder if, don't worry, Lord Zhou. They have been arranged to a safe place. When you return, you will definitely see the people you want to see." Shen Yu interrupted Lord Zhou. "Before you entered the palace, you have already sent your families to a safe place." Lord Zhou was silent for a while. He then cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, Lord Zhou. Lord Zhou is working for De Huan and His Majesty. Your family should not be treated unfairly." After a sleepless night, Shen Yu went to the side hall to take a nap. Shang Junlin still had to deal with the aftermath of the rebellion. He could not rest for the time being. When he woke up, order had been restored in the palace. The rebellion had ended before it even started. The people in the capital were not affected much. This was the best outcome. The officials began to busy themselves with their duties. Those who were energetic did not rest and directly went to work. Those who were not energetic also began to work after taking a nap. There were more officials involved. The imperial court suddenly lost half of its officials. Fortunately, Shang Junlin had trained many people over the years. These officials had been at the bottom for a long time. They could be directly promoted and used. The imperial court returned to normal in a short period of time. In the imperial study room, a hidden dragon guard suddenly appeared and presented a wooden box. "Your Majesty, this was sent by King An to you but was intercepted by our men." Genius 1 second. Remember this website, www.biku50. CC Literature website, biku50. CC. Chapter 244. Other than some small items, there was also a book. Shang Junlin was familiar with this book as he had seen many similar books in the Ji family's library when he accompanied Shen Yu to the Ji family. Other than that, there was also a small white porcelain bottle. Shang Junlin picked up the bottle. The effects of the medicine were written on the paper. Shang Junlin opened the paper and read it word by word. The more he read, the more he frowned. The words on the paper were, De Huan. Perhaps the other party knew that the medicine would land in Shang Junlin's hands and purposely placed it inside. The paper said that the medicine in the white porcelain bottle could control a person's mind to a certain extent. It was colorless and odorless, so it would not be discovered. It was concocted according to the description in the medical book. Shang Junlin thought about the conjecture he had with Xinyu. At this moment, it seemed to have been verified. After Xinyu's mother left the Ji family, could it be that the person who helped her escape from the pursuit was King In? Did the other party say why they gave these things to you? Shang Junlin put the paper back and asked in an unclear tone. That person said that these things belong to your mother and should be returned to its rightful owner. After the hidden dragon guard finished speaking, Shang Junlin became silent. After King In and his men were executed, Shang Junlin did not let down his guard. As expected, he found out that King An's men wanted to send things to Xinyu's palace. When the hidden dragon guards found out, they immediately intercepted the things and captured the men. There had always been King An's men in the palace. These men had been hiding in the palace since the time of the previous emperor. Most of the time, they were no different from ordinary palace servants and did not interact with the outside world. Only at certain times would they do something unexpected. Most of these men did not know the identity of the person they were loyal to. They were only following orders from the higher-ups. That was why Shang Junlin could not find out who ordered them to do so. The hidden dragon guards completed their task and left. The imperial study room fell into silence. Meng Chang, what do you think I should do with these things? The wooden box was placed on the table. Shang Junlin stared at it with gloomy eyes. This. I think that your majesty should discuss this with your highness. Eunuch Meng said. If it were any other emperor's favorite concubine, Eunuch Meng naturally would not give such an answer. However, he had served His Majesty for so long and had seen the progress of His Majesty's relationship with His Majesty. He knew that he could not use the relationship between a normal emperor and his favorite concubine as an analogy. We understand. How are the arrangements for the matter we previously instructed? Shang Junlin closed the box and planned to bring it to Yuzhang Palace later. Don't worry, Your Majesty. The arrangements have been made. After the end of King An's rebellion, Fang Jun brought the people from the Summer Palace back to the capital. Only then did the officials realize that everything was within His Majesty's expectations. No matter what King An and the others wanted to do, they would not succeed. Your Majesty is wise. You should have seen through the ambitions of these people long ago. Otherwise, it would have led to a disaster. According to tradition, this matter was also reported to the commoners. Only then did the commoners know that such a big thing had happened in the capital. Why are there always people who want to cause trouble? Look at this person. He's just a nobody, yet he wants to compete with our emperor. Fortunately, Your Majesty is wise and didn't let them succeed. I'm so curious. Why was the elementary school that was in preparation suddenly stopped? It turns out that it was done by these unscrupulous people. This kind of person deserves to die. The People's newspaper only gave a general idea of the matter. The specific details were not announced, but this did not prevent the commoners from spurning these ambitious people. Shang Junlin returned to Yuzhang Palace with the wooden box. Your Majesty, what is this? Xinyu asked as he watched the palace servant put the box on the table. It was sent by King An. He said it was your mother's. The palace servant opened the box under Shang Junlin's signal. Xinyu walked over and took a look. This book is from the Ji family. It's a medical book. It seems to be from the Ji family. Xinyu looked at it one by one. In addition to the book, there were some women's jewelry, a white porcelain bottle, and a jade pendant. The porcelain bottle contains medicine. Seeing Shin Yu reach for the white porcelain bottle, Shang Junlin reminded him. Shin Yu gave up on the porcelain bottle and picked up the jade pendant. This jade pendant. Shin Yu frowned. It seems to be an imperial item. Shang Junlin's attention was attracted by the contents of the paper, so he did not pay much attention to the jade pendant. Hearing this, he looked at it carefully. It was indeed. Not only was it an imperial item, but it was also a personal item of a member of the imperial family. They checked the ancient records and found that this jade pendant belonged to the emperor who had been to the Ji family. So, after my mother left the clan, she met King An. King An was also involved in everything that happened later. Shin Yu held the jade pendant and whispered. This was exactly what they had guessed at the beginning. The white porcelain bottle was sent to the Imperial Academy of Medicine along with the medical book. A few days later, news came from the Imperial Academy of Medicine. The medicine in the white porcelain bottle was just as the paper said. It could affect a person's mind. However, the effect was not immediate but subtle. No matter if it was the person who was drugged or other people, no one would be able to tell. In addition, if the medicine is taken in excess, it will also affect the offspring. Imperial physician Wu knelt on the ground, cold sweat faintly appearing on his forehead. This official and other imperial physicians in the Imperial Academy of Medicine have analyzed the composition of the medicine. A part of it overlaps with Fei Meng. Imperial physician Wu, if I remember correctly, you were in the Imperial Academy of Medicine during the time of the previous emperor, right? Shang Junlin's eyes drooped, the expression on his face unfathomable. Yes. Did you come in contact with the previous emperor at that time? Do you think it is possible that he was affected by this medicine? This. Imperial physician Wu's heart was even more uneasy. This official does not dare to speak nonsense. His uneasiness did not come from the fact that the emperor was sitting firmly on the throne, but from the fact that there might be a secret hidden behind these few words. Even if it was absurd, he was still the previous emperor of Dahuan. Who would have the courage and ability to harm the person on the throne? How many secrets were hidden in the past that was covered in dust in the long river of time? Imperial physician Wu did not dare to think too deeply. Fortunately, Shang Junlin did not delve into this topic and asked about the medical book. This medical book recorded many solutions to difficult and complicated diseases. It is very beneficial to the Imperial Academy of Medicine. Imperial physician Wu gave some examples and changed the topic. However, there are also some that are not so good. For example, the epidemic disease that appeared in the neighboring county. Imperial physician Wu later learned the truth from Imperial physician Gu. He never thought that one day he would see related records in a medical book. Shang Junlin told Shin Yu what Imperial physician Wu said. This official plans to see Prince An. Whether it was the previous emperor's matter or Shin Yu's mother's matter, they seem to be inextricably linked to Prince An. On a cool afternoon, Shin Yu and Shang Junlin went to the place where Prince An was locked up. Prince An and his group of people had been convicted. When the time was up, they would be executed according to the law. The judgment of the poor and aristocratic families who were implicated had also been announced. It would not be long before the execution. These days, the capital was very lively. Today, this house was raided, and tomorrow, that house was raided. Because these people's crimes were unforgivable, no one sympathized with them. Regarding the punishment given by the imperial court, the people only felt happy. Not to mention those who used their power to commit crimes, just the crime of rebellion was enough for them to be executed 10,000 times. Prince An was locked up in the innermost place and was heavily guarded. This time, they did not go to the place where Prince An was locked up. Instead, they let the jailer bring Prince An out. Prince An seemed to have expected their arrival. He glanced at the two people who were sitting together in an intimate posture, and a trace of disappointment appeared on his face. It seems that the things I sent didn't work. Why did you think that you could use those things to sow discord between His Majesty and me? Shen Yu wanted to fish for information from Prince, and Shang Junlin sat beside him, one hand on his shoulder, carelessly twirling his hair that fell on his shoulder. As a monarch, you should be suspicious. Shang Junlin, you really made me think highly of you. You are not like your father at all. Prince An looked at the two of them and suddenly laughed. A period of prison life did not seem to have any effect on him. He even had the leisure to joke around. If Xin Yu did not know that he was tortured in prison, he would think that he was not in prison, but was treated with good food and drinks for a period of time. This official is really curious. How does it feel to know that your father's hatred for you is related to the mother of the person you love the most? Prince An's smile was full of malice. How can this official feel? It's just a grudge between the predecessors. What does it have to do with you? Shang Junlin looked at Prince An indifferently. What does the late emperor have to do with me? When he did those things, there was no longer any father-son relationship between us. It was a fool's dream to think that he would be estranged from Xin Yu because of the late emperor. No matter why the late emperor did those things, the damage had already been done. He would never forgive him. The smile on Prince An's face froze. Xin Yu thought of the wooden box. The wooden box was supposed to be in his hands, but it was taken away by the hidden dragon guards. It passed through Shang Junlin's hands before it was returned to him. Why did you give those things to me? Xin Yu asked. Those things belonged to your mother. Naturally, they should be given to you. You should decide how to deal with them. It's also up to you whether you want to tell the person beside you. It's written clearly on the paper. With your intelligence, it shouldn't be difficult for you to understand the meaning of the things in the box. Now it seems that the things were in his hands first. As expected of the emperor, he didn't let go of any clues. Xin Yu, have you thought about what you would do if he were to vent his anger on you because of this box? Prince An's words seemed to be for Xin Yu's sake. If the box was in Xin Yu's hands, Xin Yu could very well not give it to Shang Junlin for his own sake. This way, the secret would remain a secret forever. Other than Xin Yu, no one else would know about it. However, would Prince An really be so kind? Xin Yu didn't believe it. Even if what Prince An said was true, if he chose not to tell Shang Junlin about the things in his hands, it would be fine for a short period of time. However, as time passed, the knot in his heart would grow bigger and bigger. There would also be cracks in their relationship. Xin Yu would feel guilty because of this secret. The better Shang Junlin treated him, the more guilty he would feel. There was a limit to how much a person could bear. When every bit of love brought about the same or even more guilt, the person who couldn't bear it first would be the one who hid the secret. No matter how deep a relationship was, it couldn't withstand this kind of torture. The longer the secret was hidden, the more variables it would bring. The longer it was delayed, the deeper the damage it would cause. Shang Junlin certainly knew this. The more you cared about someone, the easier it was to worry about personal gains and losses. At first, he thought about not telling Xin Yu and dealing with this matter himself. However, in the end, he didn't hide it from him. This matter was related to Xin Yu's mother. He had the right to know the truth. He was also worried about whether Xin Yu would bear a grudge if he knew about it. Fortunately, what he worried about didn't happen. His Majesty won't. Besides, if you really did it for my good, you shouldn't have sent the box into the palace. When you sent people to do it, you should have thought about who would get the box first. Xin Yu sneered. Didn't you do it to let His Majesty get the box first? Xin Yu stood up and took 2 steps forward. You want His Majesty to feel that he was betrayed by the person he loves the most. You don't care about what will happen to me. Your purpose is just to make His Majesty suffer. Am I right? You have a sharp tongue. Prince An didn't refute. This meant that he agreed with Shin Yu's words. Your behavior has always been contradictory. Otherwise, His Majesty and I would have guessed that you were the one who did these things. What do you want to do? Genius 1 second. Remember this website, www.biku50. CC Literature Mobile Version Reading URL, biku50. CC. Chapter 245. If you really want the throne, you don't have to go through so much trouble, Shin Yu continued. Who said that I want the throne? Prince An scoffed. I'm not interested in the throne. I can see that. Shin Yu nodded. If Prince An was really interested in the throne, he wouldn't have pushed the 17th prince to the throne. Aren't you curious about why I did this? Now that I've lost, there's no harm in telling you. I don't want the Great Huan dynasty to be peaceful. I want to destroy everything. Why did you help me? Shang Junlin walked behind Shin Yu and looked down at him. Shang Junlin was talking about his ascension to the throne. At that time, other than Prince Li, Prince An was also on his side. Although Shang Junlin could have ascended the throne without their help, there would have been more twists and turns in the process. With these two people, the process was much easier. Because my good brother didn't want you to succeed the throne. Of course, I didn't want to satisfy him. He threw you in the palace and let you fend for yourself. He wanted to use the excuse of sending troops to get rid of you, but I didn't let him do as he wished. I wanted to see all the fruits of his labor being taken by the child he disliked the most. Moreover, the throne should have belonged to him. If it wasn't for me. Prince An paused and continued, would have returned it to its rightful owner. The previous emperor didn't like His Majesty. Was it related to you? Shin Yu caught the key point from Prince An's words. Yes, he was the most outstanding among my brother's children. I only wanted to see him suffer. How could I tolerate their father-son relationship? Prince An closed his eyes. It was as if he could still see the previous emperor, the previous empress, and little Shang Junlin's happy family. He joined in with a smile on his face, but his heart was entangled by a poisonous snake. The scene in front of him was so glaring. He should be the one enjoying all of this. My men found a secret room in your imperial residence. It was filled with portraits of the same woman. The person in the portrait was none other than my imperial mother. Shouldn't Wang explain why you hid those portraits? When the hidden dragon guards found the secret room, they did not dare to delay and immediately informed Shang Junlin. Shang Junlin was not interested in the woman in the painting. He did not expect that the woman in the painting was his mother. The memories of his childhood had been suppressed at the bottom of his heart. The moment he saw the portrait, he couldn't help but think of his mother who had hugged him and whispered softly when he was young. The memories faded, and the portrait was dyed with color again. Shang Junlin did not tell anyone about this matter, including Shin Yu. The news was suppressed, and those who knew about it were also silenced. At that moment, Shang Junlin's heart was in a mess. He seemed to have found the reason behind Prince An's actions, but he would rather not have found it. Shang Junlin was not an indecisive person. He directly asked Prince An in front of him. Whether it was true or not, Prince An would be able to give a direct answer. When he heard Shang Junlin's words, Prince An was stunned. He sighed and said, "So, you found out. You did all this because of my imperial mother." Shang Junlin suddenly felt the pressure around him drop. Shin Yu moved his fingers and grabbed the man's hand in his sleeve to comfort him. He did not expect to suddenly hear such news. During this period of time, because of Prince An's matter and the fact that he had left the capital for a few months, the imperial court was very busy. Shang Junlin spent most of his time in the imperial study room dealing with political affairs. Most of the time, when he returned to Yuzhang Palace, Shen Yu had already gone to bed. When he woke up in the morning, the man would have already gone to the imperial court. Other than them, there were only the hidden dragon guards brought by Shang Junlin. There was no need to worry about the news being leaked. This was also the reason why Shang Junlin directly asked. Prince An did not answer this question. Instead, he said, "You should know that I and the late emperor are both legitimate children. However, I was born after the empress. The previous emperor was the legitimate son of the first wife, but his mother died early. His successor was the younger sister of the same mother. After entering the palace, she treated the previous emperor as her own. In order to take better care of her sister's child, she didn't care about her own child. This prince really doesn't understand why this prince, who is her biological son, has to endure and give in to the previous emperor. This prince has heard the most since I was young, that's your biological brother, you can't fight with him. In order to prevent me from threatening the late emperor's position, she even drugged me. That was the first time she personally made food for me. However, it was to drug me. How laughable. Since then, I hid all my brilliance and devoted myself to the mountains and rivers. I ran out of the imperial palace every day. I became the one who did not do proper work among all the princes. Imperial father knew everything and promised to compensate this prince. This prince doesn't care about his compensation, but he shouldn't have gone back on his word. What did he do? I traveled the mountains and rivers and met the young lady of the Zhong family who returned to the capital with her father. After returning to the capital, I asked father to marry the young lady of the Zhong family. Father agreed. However, after mother knew about it, she took a fancy to the Zhong family's background. She felt that the young lady of the Zhong family was more suitable to be the crown princess. I waited and waited until I heard the news that the young lady of the Zhong family was conferred as the crown princess. The young lady of the Zhong family was Shang Junlin's mother. Shen Yu and Shang Junlin didn't expect that there was such a secret in the middle. I went to find father and happened to hear the conversation between father and mother. They were talking about what was best for the crown prince. They didn't mention me, their son. They said that since the crown prince was the elder brother, he should get married earlier than me. However, at that time, the crown prince already had a concubine with an extraordinary family background. I went to find the crown prince again. The crown prince said that he liked the young lady of the Zhong family very much and would treat her well in the future. According to what you said, the relationship between the late emperor and your mother should be very good. Why didn't your mother get the honor she deserved in the end? Shen Yu had some understanding of the imperial family. He clearly remembered that the late emperor sent the Empress Dowager to the imperial ancestral temple less than a year after he ascended the throne. Because he felt that his mother's death was related to her. It was easy to arouse the suspicion of an emperor. As long as there were some specious clues, he would rather kill the wrong person than let it go. This was the first step that Prince An took. He completely denied the kindness of others to the late emperor. He wanted the late emperor to feel that everyone who got close to him had ulterior motives. His suspicion would not only hurt himself, but also hurt those who really loved him. Didn't they say that people who sat on the throne would eventually become lonely? Prince An didn't mind letting him have a taste of loneliness in advance. The matter of the Empress Dowager planted the seed of the late emperor's change in temperament. The imperial harem was constantly filled with new people, and your mother was troubled. But she was the empress and couldn't do anything inappropriate. I told her early on that the emperor's heart was fickle, but she didn't believe me. So I did a little experiment. Your father didn't let me down. Just based on some groundless rumors, he sentenced your mother to death in his heart. They all knew what happened after that. The late empress was neglected and suppressed by other favored concubines. In the face of the late emperor's distrust, she chose to die to show her sincerity. The Zhong family was also punished because of the late emperor's unpredictable mood. As the late empress's son, Shang Junlin was suspected by his father to not be his own child. He was neglected and exiled. As for why the late emperor didn't investigate, Shen Yu could roughly guess the reason. Verifying the bloodline would cause a big commotion. The late emperor probably didn't want to publicize this matter. From the late empress's death until now, no one knew the specific reason for this. You also meddled in Prince Huayu's matter. Shen Yu thought of the people Prince An placed in the imperial palace. Many of these people had been there since the late emperor's reign. If Prince An had done so many things at that time, it wasn't surprising that there were so many of his people in the imperial palace. Prince An said he felt that the late emperor had mistakenly killed the person he loved. In fact, that person was disguised by me from the beginning to deliberately get close to him. The purpose was to make Prince Huayu hate the late emperor. That way, I wouldn't have to do some things personally. Shen Yu said, the late emperor's temperament changed greatly. Was it related to the medicine you sent to the imperial palace? Prince An said, that medicine actually doesn't have much effect on people, but it will subtly magnify some paranoid thoughts. Who told him not to be willing to trust the people around him? Everyone is suspicious, so it's inevitable that his actions will become more and more extreme. Shen Yu said, this medicine, have you ever used it on His Majesty? This question could be said to be very unexpected. Even Shang Junlin didn't expect Shen Yu to suddenly ask such a question. Shen Yu just thought of the past life. In the past life, Shang Junlin became a tyrant in the eyes of the world. His actions became more and more violent. Could it be related to the medicine? Thinking about the situation of Shang Junlin in the past life, wasn't he the lonely person that Prince An talked about? Prince An said, His Majesty was not like the late emperor who didn't guard against me. I can't do this. If it were you, you could easily succeed. Shen Yu said, so, it's just that you can't do it, but it's not that you don't want to do it. Prince An said, why do you need to delve into it? Isn't the result the same? Father and son, you can't treat them differently. Not the same, Shen Yu thought. Of course it was not the same. However, Prince An's words had already given him an answer. Once there was a chance, he would definitely make a move on Shang Junlin. Shang Junlin didn't forget the other purpose of coming here. He said, why do you have something that belonged to a Yu's mother in your hands? When I was patrolling my fief, I met a woman who was being chased. When I saw the imperial token in her hands, I rescued her. Speaking of which, I am the savior of your mother. Those things are the reward that your mother gave to me. After recovering from his injuries, Prince An brought the woman to the capital. Of course, he didn't save her for nothing. Shen Yu's mother gave the things she took from the clan to Prince An as a reward. Among them, there was a medical book from the Ji family. You used the method in the medical book to create the medicine to control the late emperor. So this matter was caused by his mother. You can think of it that way. Prince An's tone was full of malice. Shen Yu calmed himself down and said, by doing this, you want His Majesty and I to follow in the footsteps of the late emperor. I didn't do anything, it's just that I returned it to its rightful owner. If that's the case, why did you send that flower to the palace? Since he had contact with his mother, he should know the use of the flower. But he didn't say anything and directly sent the flower to the palace. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't seem right. When I sent the flower to the palace, I thought that His Majesty wouldn't let the flower appear in front of you. This nephew of mine is very possessive of the people or things that belong to him. You are the person that he has set his mind on. He definitely wouldn't want to let other people's gifts occupy too much of your mind. And if this flower wants to bear fruit, it must be taken care of by the Ji family's bloodline. Who would have thought that this flower would be taken care of by you? This point was out of Prince An's arrangement, so he had to adjust his plan. So you want to do something to the flower? First, you ordered the people in the palace to put hallucinogenic drugs in the flower room. Now that your plan didn't work, you want to destroy the flower with fire. The former is to make us wary of the flower and achieve the goal of keeping me away from the flower. If it was more extreme, maybe the flower would be destroyed by the angry His Majesty. The latter is even simpler, it is to destroy the flower directly. Shen Yu's thoughts became clearer and clearer. Prince An first sent the flower that could cure him to their hands, then created an accident to destroy the flower. Finally, he told them the truth. And your purpose of doing this is to let His Majesty taste the despair of falling into the abyss after seeing hope. Now it seems that you are destined to be disappointed. I failed, but I didn't completely fail. Shen Yu knew what he was referring to. With the memory of his previous life, he couldn't completely ignore it. Genius 1 second. Remember this website, www.biku50. CC Literature Mobile Version Reading URL, biku50. CC. Chapter 246. Shen Yu wrapped his arms around Shang Junlin's waist and leaned on his shoulder. He didn't say anything. He didn't know what to say. He knew that some things didn't happen in this life. He also knew that if he couldn't forget it, he would be doing what Prince An wanted. He didn't care about anything else, but he couldn't ignore Shang Junlin. What happened in his previous life was his biggest secret. He once told Shang Junlin part of it in Prince Yu's dream, but he didn't tell him the rest. Even if Prince An really drugged me, it has nothing to do with you. I trusted him too easily. Besides, Prince An didn't succeed. What's you worried about? On the way back to the palace, Shang Junlin noticed that something was wrong with Shen Yu. If my mother didn't bring the medical book, the late emperor wouldn't have. Shang Junlin lifted Shen Yu's face and looked at his blank eyes. His voice was calm and powerful, whether there was the medical book or not. With Prince An's temper, he wouldn't have let the late emperor have an easy time. That's their grudge. It has nothing to do with the Yu's mother who brought the medical book. Shen Yu responded softly. Shang Junlin's fingers fell on Shen Yu's face and slowly rubbed it. His other hand went down and pulled Shen Yu into his arms. He kissed Shen Yu comfortingly. Shen Yu slowly closed his eyes. When Shen Yu woke up the next day, Shang Junlin had already gone to the imperial court. Mu Shi brought hot water and helped Shen Yu wash up. She came back to the capital with Fang Jun some time ago. Shen Yu and Shang Junlin didn't bring her along when they went to the Ji clan. During this period of time, many things happened in the imperial residence. She was worried about Shen Yu's situation. She only felt relieved when she saw that he was safe and sound. What happened in the imperial residence after His Majesty and I left? Shen Yu asked while tidying up his sleeves. The weather was getting colder. Shen Yu had already changed into thick clothes. After the warning in his body was removed, the insufficiency of his body, which was brought from his mother's womb, was no longer suppressed. He was more afraid of the cold than ordinary people. The first few days were the same as usual, but on the 10th day, some unfamiliar faces began to appear. Later on, the number of appearances became more and more frequent. A month later, a large number of unknown forces appeared near the palace. The palace did not have enough manpower, so they did not act rashly. A few days later, the palace was surrounded by these people. The people in the palace were on high alert. This servant thought that a fight would break out, but just as those people were about to make a move, a large number of troops came and restrained them. Shen Yu knew that the last ones to appear were Shang Junlin's men. Although Shang Junlin was in the Ji clan's territory, he had not cut off contact with the outside world. They had arranged this to lure the fish to take the bait. After controlling the forces that appeared near the imperial residence, they did not make it public. Instead, they continued to let those people write back to Prince An, saying that the plan was proceeding smoothly. After tidying himself up, Imperial Physician Gu also arrived. Shen Yu's body was recovering well. After checking his pulse, Imperial Physician Gu said, "This servant has already discussed with Imperial Physician Wu about the treatment method for you. In 7 days, we can start." Because he participated in the treatment, Imperial Physician Wu also came. After Imperial Physician Gu finished checking his pulse, he also checked Shen Yu's pulse. When Shang Junlin came back from the morning court, the 2 imperial physicians had not left yet. The 2 of them were talking to Shen Yu about some precautions during the treatment. They needed to make the final adjustments to the prescription according to Shen Yu's physical condition. After ensuring that there were no mistakes, they could give it to Shen Yu. Therefore, the more they knew about Shen Yu's physical condition, the better. Since the 2 imperial physicians were there, Shen Yu asked about the medical book and the medicine in the white porcelain bottle. "Can you really not find out anything about that medicine after taking it?" "In response to your question, if we didn't know about it in advance, it would be difficult to find out from the pulse. But now that we know about its existence, we naturally have a way to find out," Imperial Physician Gu said. "As long as any medicine has been used, it will leave traces. For example, the epidemic disease that appeared in Lin County before. If we didn't know in advance that it was caused by humans and didn't know what kind of medicine caused it, we would most likely treat it as an ordinary epidemic disease," Imperial Physician Wu added. "In other words, if there is a person who has been poisoned, you can find out." Shen Yu was interested. Although there are some difficulties, it is indeed possible. In terms of medical skills, the 2 imperial physicians were very confident. During this period of time, the imperial physicians had been studying the contents of the medical book. They had some understanding of the various medicines described in the book. They immediately talked about the medicine in the porcelain bottle. Before leaving, Imperial Physician Gu hesitated for a moment and said, "This servant has something to say." "Shang Junlin, say it." Imperial Physician Gu, "It's like this. This servant has seen the books in the Ji family's collection and found that the one your majesty sent to the imperial physicians is slightly different from the one I read in the Ji family. Although the appearance is very similar, the texture is not the same. Moreover, according to this servant's understanding, the medical books in the Ji family are organized according to categories. There won't be a situation where the majority of the books are used to save people and the other half are used to harm people." Shang Junlin's expression became serious. Imperial Physician Gu means that this medical book doesn't come from the Ji family. Imperial Physician Gu, this servant can't answer this question, but this servant is sure that the contents of this medical book have been edited. Or rather, someone deliberately added a part of the contents. "I understand. You can leave now. This servant will send someone to investigate." Shang Junlin had always been a man of action. After Imperial Physician Gu left, he immediately ordered someone to investigate. Although it had been a long time and it would be difficult to find anything, this matter must be investigated clearly. Shang Junlin knew that Shen Yu cared about the medical book. With Prince An's personality, it was not impossible for him to deliberately give such a book to sow discord between them. Even if Shang Junlin didn't mind, he didn't want Shen Yu to have a knot in his heart. Shen Yu also didn't expect that the medical book matter would have such a twist. However, after thinking about it carefully, he felt that it was not strange. Prince An's personality was one that didn't want anyone to have a good life. It was indeed possible for him to do such a thing. Shen Yu rubbed against Shang Junlin's chest. He hoped that this matter would come to light soon. Shang Junlin intentionally diverted his attention and said, do you want to know where Prince An's 300,000 soldiers and horses came from?" Were they also left by the late emperor? Shin Yu's first reaction was this. 150,000 soldiers were left by the late emperor. The other 150,000 soldiers were secretly raised by him over the years. The late emperor's 150,000 soldiers and horses were part of the Lin family's army. After Gu Huai confronted them outside the capital, those people recognized the other part of the Lin family's army that returned to the capital with Gu Huai and led them to change sides on the spot. This battle was far easier than expected. If Prince An knew that everything he did was a wedding dress for General Gu, I don't know how he would feel. First, it was the armor and other military supplies left by the Lin family. Then, it was the Lin family's army that was incorporated back then. His painstaking planning had all benefited others. This servant told Prince An that he wanted to destroy De Huan. This servant will let him watch helplessly as De Huan becomes better and better under my leadership. Even in prison, Shang Junlin didn't want Prince An to have an easy time. Prince An wasn't the only one who could do this. Prince An wanted to destroy his relationship with Shin Yu and let him taste pain. He would return the same pain. How did your majesty arrange for those who defected? With so many soldiers and horses, how to settle them down was also a problem. Among these people, many of them were part of the Lin family's army. This servant asked for their opinions. Some wanted to leave the army, while some wanted to stay. This servant let them go according to their wishes. As for those who stayed, they were separated and sent to different places. Did General Gu say anything? Everyone knew about Gu Huai's identity. He was the descendant of the Lin family, so he might have some ideas on how to settle these people. Shang Junlin wanted to put him in an important position, so he couldn't let this matter become a barrier between the two of them. This arrangement was proposed by Gu Huai, Shang Junlin said. Although Gu Huai was young, he had experienced many things since he was young. He knew what was best for him. The Lin family's case was overturned, and the culprits who caused the destruction of the Lin family would be punished. His brother would also be fine. To Gu Huai, this was the best situation. With Prince An captured, it was easier for Gu Huai to investigate what happened back then. He was already suspicious of Prince An, so he directly investigated Prince An and found out a lot of things. There was a drug that had the same effect as the one produced by the Lin family's elite troops. This was also the main reason for the failure of that battle. Gu Huai was ordered to clean up Prince An's remaining forces. Everything that Prince An had done over the years was exposed to the world. Disregard for human life, killing loyal people, killing brothers, each of these things was horrifying. Gu Huai captured a few of Prince An's confidants alive. He pried open their mouths and found out the details of the Lin family's matter. It turned out that the Lin family was destroyed because they accidentally offended Prince An. Prince An felt that no matter what he did, the Great Han dynasty would not be in trouble as long as the Lin family was still around. Therefore, he coerced and bribed the adjutant of the Lin family to fabricate evidence that the Lin family was in cahoots with foreign enemies. After the incident, he did not give anyone a chance to explain and directly attack the Lin family. He lied about the enemy's information and lured the Lin family soldiers into the enemy's encirclement. Dead men tell no tales, and the crime was confirmed. On the other hand, he sent assassins to infiltrate the Lin residence. After the deed was done, he burned the Lin residence to the ground. Gu Huai went to the palace that night to meet the emperor. Shang Junlin summoned him to the imperial study. Shin Yu also followed. The young general with a cold aura immediately knelt down and reported the results of the interrogation to the two of them. Other than the Lin family, there were a few other loyal officials who were wronged. Prince An was behind this. Other than that, there is also the matter of this year's epidemic. I have already sorted out the testimonies. Please have a look, Your Majesty. Eunuch Meng took it and presented it to Shang Junlin. The more he read, the lower the pressure around Shang Junlin became. There was also another matter that Shang Junlin ordered Gu Huai to focus on. It was related to the medical book. According to King An's confidant, the medicine recorded in the medical book was basically a life-saving medicine. After King An got his hands on it, he ordered his subordinates to research it and accidentally created another medicine. A few days ago, for some unknown reason, King An ordered his subordinates to copy the original medical book and create an exact copy. He also specifically instructed them to write in the prescription that they had researched themselves. After it was completed, he destroyed the original. The medical book that was sent to the imperial palace was the copy that Prince An ordered people to copy. I told you, don't think too much. Shen Yu also finished reading. He leaned on Shang Junlin's shoulder and said coldly, Prince An is really unscrupulous in order to disgust people. He was very good at controlling people's minds. He knew what to do and what to hurt people the most. He also hid it well. In his previous life, Shen Yu did not know that Prince An was the mastermind behind all this. Let's not talk about him. Shang Junlin rubbed Shen Yu's hand. Yu's birthday is coming soon. This year, I want to give Yu a big present. Yu is not allowed to refuse. Genius 1 second. Remember this website, www.biku50. CC Literature Mobile Version Website, biku50. CC. Chapter 247. It won't be a surprise if I tell you the secret. Yu just needs to remember not to reject it when the time comes. Shang Junlin kept him in suspense. Shen Yu turned around and straddled Shang Junlin. What does your majesty want to give me? Why are you being so mysterious? Shang Junlin took advantage of the situation and hugged Shen Yu's waist, pulled him towards himself, and kissed Yu's light-colored lips. Yu's birthday gift naturally deserves the best. Because of Shang Junlin's attitude, Shen Yu became curious about the birthday gift. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he pestered, Shang Junlin refused to tell him what it was. It was enough to keep him in suspense. Shen Yu began to look forward to the arrival of that day. Winter was approaching. The Shangyi Bureau entered the palace to take measurements for Shen Yu and Shang Junlin to make new winter clothes. Shen Yu was well nourished in the palace, and his body had gained some weight. This made Shang Junlin, who had been feeding him attentively, feel a sense of accomplishment. The treatment of his deficiency had also officially begun. It was a 3-in-1 method: medicinal bath, acupuncture, and medicine. Hearing that he was going to take a medicinal bath, Shang Junlin's first reaction was to take a medicinal bath like the one in the Ji family. He frowned. Must there be a medicinal bath? The medicinal bath is to make it easier to absorb the medicine. Some medicines are not suitable to be taken orally. The medicinal bath is more effective. Imperial physician Wu did not understand why Shang Junlin was so against it, so he explained. Shang Junlin looked at Imperial physician Gu. Will it be the same as the one in the Ji family? Your Majesty, don't worry. This medicinal bath will not cause any discomfort. It is different from the one in the Ji family. The ones that cause intense pain are rare. Imperial physician Gu, who had participated in the withdrawal incident, immediately knew the crux of the problem. When it was time for the medicinal bath, Shang Junlin insisted on watching from the side. Shen Yu had no choice but to let him do it. As Imperial physician Gu said, the medicinal bath did not cause any discomfort to Shen Yu. Instead, it made him sleepy. Shang Junlin finally felt relieved. Everything in the imperial court proceeded in an orderly manner. As the influence of King An gradually faded, the crimes of King An and his men were publicly announced. According to the laws of the Great Huan dynasty, King An and the 17th prince were stripped of their royal status and demoted to commoners. Everyone involved in the rebellion, including King An and the 17th prince, would be sentenced to death. Their families would also be implicated because of them, and no one would sympathize with them. After knowing what crimes they had committed, the commoners all applauded and praised this result. Shang Junlin did not disclose to the public what King An had done to the late emperor and the late empress. Even the courtiers did not know much about it. The location of the primary school and the start date had been confirmed. It would be held in the spring of next year. There were no gender restrictions. If people were interested, they could sign up for their children. Shang Junlin placed great importance on this matter. He did not dare to be perfunctory and did his best to complete it. After the incident with King An, the aristocratic families were not as powerful as before. If it were not for Master Duan, their status in the imperial court would have been further reduced. At this time, they did not dare to go against Shang Junlin's wishes. They did whatever Shang Junlin asked them to do. Shang Junlin sent people to bring back the armor left behind by the Lin family and the property hidden by the late emperor to the capital. The Minister of Revenue led people to take inventory overnight and put them back into the national treasury. To the current Great Huan dynasty, this was an unexpected fortune. The national treasury was abundant and the military was strong. The Great Huan dynasty had become a giant that could not be provoked. On the other hand, the northern desert was deteriorating. The internal strife had greatly reduced their national strength. Jiang Huiqing became a guest of honor of a certain prince. Under his suggestion, the prince who was forced to retreat by his brothers and uncles sent a letter to the Great Huan dynasty asking for help. The Northern Desert Army, which had been preparing for a long time, stepped into the northern desert. This winter was destined to not be peaceful for people in some places. Shen Yu noticed that the palace servants were busy in the imperial palace. He asked Shang Junlin about it and was told that they were preparing for a banquet. You said last year that we would hold a big banquet this year. Shen Yu remembered that there was indeed such a thing. Last year, Shang Junlin wanted to hold a big banquet but was rejected by Shen Yu. Many things had happened this year. A big banquet would be good for relaxing the tense mind. This year's state of mind was different from last year. If Shang Junlin wanted to hold a banquet, Shen Yu would not reject it. However, he always felt that Shang Junlin wanted to do more than this. On this day, Shen Yu was watering the flowers in the greenhouse. Mu Shi walked in quickly and approached Shen Yu. She whispered, "Master, something happened in the imperial court today. It has something to do with you." "Oh." Shen Yu put down the small kettle in his hand and picked up a clean handkerchief to wipe his hands. "Today, several ministers in the imperial court petitioned for your majesty to appoint an empress." Shen Yu paused. "They haven't given up yet." Shen Yu's first reaction was that these ministers wanted Shang Junlin to marry a woman as his empress. It was not surprising that he thought so. After all, it was not the first time these ministers wrote a petition. "I only heard it from the palace servants who were serving over there. I don't know what exactly was discussed in the imperial court. It is said that many ministers are involved this time." Shang Junlin did not expect that after King An's incident, there would be people focusing on the vacant empress position. "I seem to have said that my private affairs are not for others to interfere." Shang Junlin sat on the dragon throne and looked down at the ministers who stood up to speak. The emotions in his eyes were unclear. "What about you? Do you also think that I should appoint an empress?" His cold gaze swept across the ministers one by one, bringing about an invisible pressure. A few more ministers knelt down, including the Minister of Revenue. Looking at the people kneeling below, Shang Junlin knocked on the armrest of the dragon throne. Eunuch Meng, who was standing behind him, trembled with fear. He thought to himself, "What's wrong with these ministers? Didn't your majesty repeatedly say that they are not allowed to interfere with the affairs of the imperial harem?" The Minister of Revenue knew that your majesty might have misunderstood something, so he quickly added, "I think that Shen Guijun is intelligent and considerate. If she were to become the empress, it would be a great blessing for De Huan. Ha! Eunuch Meng was stunned. So it was not to marry a newbie but to appoint Shen Guijun as the empress. Eunuch Meng followed Shang Junlin and served him closely. He knew that Shang Junlin was busy preparing a surprise for Shen Yu. Coincidentally, it was the same as what the ministers proposed today. Naturally, the ministers had discussed it before coming to submit their memorials. These days, they gradually learned about what Shen Yu had done. Whether it was the flood in Linxian, the disaster in Subei, or the recent events, it was not difficult to see that he was a person of great talent. If he had not entered the harem by accident, he would certainly have been able to shine in the court. Although the imperial harem was not allowed to interfere with politics, Shen Yu had always been very low-key. He did not care about such a big contribution. If they did not accidentally learn about it, wouldn't they continue to hide it? From Shang Junlin's attitude, it could be seen that the young emperor of De Huan had no other choice but to marry Shen Yu. Since that was the case, why should they do something that would make him unhappy? The Minister of Rites revealed that the emperor had privately asked him about an auspicious day. They thought that since the emperor did not want to appoint anyone else as the empress, he would not refuse to appoint Shen Yu as the empress. With Shen Guijun's contributions and the changes he had brought to De Huan, it was more than enough to appoint him as the empress. The more they were involved, the more they felt that De Huan was very different from before Shen Guijun entered the imperial harem. Putting aside all selfish motives, who didn't want De Huan to become better and better? The pressure on their bodies suddenly disappeared. They immediately understood that their thoughts were not wrong. Shang Junlin, who was sitting at the top, spoke in an unclear tone. You mean to say that we should appoint Shen Guijun as the empress? Yes. Since that is the case, let the imperial astronomer pick an auspicious day. We also feel that Shen Guijun can be the empress. The appointment of the empress was a major event. The Minister of Rites received the order and began to get busy. The empress appointment ceremony in De Huan had corresponding specifications. Shang Junlin did not even think and chose the one with the highest specifications. After the court, Shang Junlin, who was in a good mood, asked the Minister of Rites and the others to discuss matters. When they finished discussing, it was already noon. Shang Junlin did want to appoint an empress, but it was different from what the ministers thought. He wanted to give Shen Yu far more than just the position of empress. After listening to his words, the Minister of Rites' face showed that he was in a difficult position. Your Majesty, no need to say more. Just do as we say. Shang Junlin had already made up his mind. Even if the ministers did not mention it today, he would take the initiative to mention it in a few days. When he returned to Yuzhang Palace, Shen Yu greeted him. Your Majesty is not angry today. Why would I be angry? Shang Junlin was in a good mood after completing something that he had wanted to do for a long time. Didn't the ministers ask Your Majesty to appoint an empress today? I thought Your Majesty would be angry. Shen Yu turned around. Her arm was grabbed. Before she could get away, she was pulled into the man's arms. Shang Junlin lowered his head and rubbed Shen Yu's neck. How did you know? Are you angry? Even Your Majesty is not angry. Why should I be angry? A Yu indeed does not need to be angry. If I want to appoint an empress, who else can I appoint besides a Yu? It was lunchtime. Shen Yu and Shang Junlin finished their meal and took a nap. When they woke up, Shang Junlin was reviewing memorials. Shen Yu was used to this scene. He put on his coat and walked over slowly. When the memorials were opened, Shen Yu inadvertently glanced at them. It was a memorials requesting the appointment of an empress. Has Your Majesty received a lot of memorials like this recently? Shen Yu sat beside Shang Junlin. Shang Junlin put down his pen and pointed to a pile of memorials next to him. These are all here. Why do they not stop? Shin Yu took out one of the memorials, opened it, and looked at a few lines. His movements paused. Shin Yu put the memorials in his hand aside and opened the other memorials. The contents were similar to the one he had read the first time. He turned his head and looked at Shang Junlin. There was a rare look of confusion on his face. This is... Shang Junlin rubbed the top of his head. Didn't the person who told you the news say that the ministers do want me to appoint an empress? The person they support is you. In addition to this, there are many memorials that mention this matter. How can it be? Shin Yu could understand why these ministers wanted Shang Junlin to appoint an empress. However, Shin Yu could not understand why they wanted Shang Junlin to appoint him as an empress. Your Majesty, Shin Yu adjusted his sitting position and faced Shang Junlin. There was suspicion in his eyes. Did you do something? I promised that I did not do anything to them. It was all their own actions. How can you suspect me? I did not. I just feel that this matter is a bit unbelievable. Compared to what you did, it is not strange that they want you to be the empress. Genius 1 second. Remember this website, www.biku50. CC Literature Mobile Version Website, Biku50. CC. Chapter 248. Shin Yu almost fell into the deep affection in those eyes. In a trance, he couldn't help but want to nod his head. He reacted in an instant and looked at the man in front of him. It was this person who forcefully intruded into his life and brought him a completely different life experience. He felt warmth and the feeling of being loved. If this continued, Shin Yu felt that he would not be able to resist. People in the dark longed for light. Even if it was a weak firefly, they would want to hold on to it, not to mention the dazzling sun. Shang Junlin and Shin Yu were like this. How could Shin Yu and Shang Junlin not be like this? Shang Junlin was waiting for an answer. In the process of waiting, he felt nervous for the first time in a long time. His identity and status could not play any role. Only his sincerity was his bargaining chip. Shin Yu felt the man's nervousness. He raised his hand and covered the man's hand. Your Majesty, you have to think carefully. Once I agree, Your Majesty will not have anyone else except me. Hearing Shin Yu's words, Shang Junlin relaxed and smiled slowly. I thought that I had already given you an answer. Except for you, I will not have anyone else. If he was really that kind of person who liked beauties, after ascending the throne for so many years, his harem would not be clean. If Shin Yu did not appear, he would not have anyone by his side until the end. Only Shin Yu, he only recognized Shin Yu. Under Shang Junlin's expectant gaze, Shin Yu nodded and smiled. I am willing, Your Majesty. They both knew what this willing represented. From now on, the two of them would be tightly bound together. When one of them was mentioned in the future, the other would be mentioned as well. They would never be separated. The anxiety in Shang Junlin's eyes disappeared and was replaced by joy. He released the hand that was holding Shin Yu's face and wrapped it around his waist. With a little force, he pulled Shin Yu into his arms. We are very happy. I am very happy. Shang Junlin buried his head in Shin Yu's neck. His warm breath sprayed on her sensitive skin, causing the person in his arms to tremble slightly. Shin Yu nestled in Shang Junlin's arms and hugged him back. The afterglow of the setting sun poured down and landed on the two of them, giving them a hazy golden hue. After receiving Shin Yu's reply, Shang Junlin was overjoyed. He immediately ordered the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the Ministry of Rights to start preparing. Everyone in the palace and the court could feel His Majesty's joy. When the emperor was in a good mood, the subjects were also happy. They no longer had to be nervous when going to court and worry about offending the emperor because of a mistake. The imperial astronomer selected a few good dates and presented them. One of them coincided with Shen Yu's birthday, which was also Shang Junlin's favorite date. It was just that time was a little tight. That day was less than 2 months away. The ministers were more inclined to choose an auspicious date after the beginning of spring next year. There was plenty of time to prepare. In the end, the date was decided to be Shen Yu's birthday. The National Treasury received a windfall from the sky. In addition, the Minister of Revenue had a good impression of Shen Yu, who was about to become the Empress. When it came to allocating money, the Minister of Revenue changed his stingy style and gave as much as she wanted. Shang Junlin's own private storage was also free to use. The ministers could imagine how luxurious the coronation ceremony would be. Because Shen Yu was a man, there were some procedures that needed to be adjusted. Shang Junlin attached great importance to this matter. The Minister of Rites in charge of this matter was often asked to stay after the morning court to report the progress to Shang Junlin. Shen Yu could feel that the palace servants were busy. Shang Junlin made up his mind to take this opportunity to lure Shen Yu into his bedroom. He ordered people to refurbish the bedroom. During this period, he even brought Shen Yu over to see if he was dissatisfied with anything or if he had any suggestions for changes. The palace had a palace specially built for the Empress. Shen Yu observed for a few days and found that Shang Junlin only ordered people to refurbish the Emperor's bedroom. He didn't order people to refurbish the Empress's bedroom. He couldn't help but be curious. Your Majesty is building your own bedroom. Where will I live in the future? Because the two of them had been living in Yuzhang Palace, it had been refurbished before Shen Yu moved in. Now it was untouched. You and my husband are one. Of course, you will live in the same place as me. Previously, you said that it was not good to live in my bedroom for a long time and refused to come over. After this, you should be able to live with peace of mind. After understanding Shang Junlin's plan, Shen Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This time, he didn't refuse. He wasn't the kind of person who scrupulously followed etiquette. If he was, he wouldn't have done such a rebellious thing in his previous life. He didn't agree before because he felt that the relationship between him and Shang Junlin hadn't reached that stage yet. Now that the two of them were connected, Shen Yu certainly didn't mind where he lived. The moment he agreed to Shang Junlin, he completely gave himself to this man. The layout of the bedroom was completely according to Shen Yu's preferences. Shen Yu was very attentive to this place where he would live for a long time in the future. Shang Junlin was very clear about Shen Yu's preferences. Shen Yu liked all the places that he personally ordered to be refurbished. The Emperor's joyous occasion was also a joyous occasion for the people. With a wave of his hand, Shang Junlin exempted the people from taxes for 3 years. At the same time, he implemented other policies that were beneficial to the people. No matter how good it sounded, it couldn't compare to the actual benefits. Once the news was announced, the people were more optimistic about Shen Yu being the Empress. More than a month passed in the blink of an eye. The cold weather couldn't dispel the heat in the hearts. Amidst the anticipation of the people, the day of the coronation ceremony arrived. Shen Yu got up early. Mu Shi brought people to help him put on the newly delivered red wedding clothes. His long black hair was tied up and fixed on the top of his head with an exquisite jade crown. Young master is so beautiful today. Mu Shi put down the ivory comb and sighed. The officials had been waiting for a long time. As soon as they entered the palace, they were shocked by His Majesty's extravagance. The decorations in the palace were extremely luxurious. Treasures that couldn't be found outside could be seen everywhere. It wasn't difficult to see how much His Majesty valued this day from the decorations. Although the preparation time was a bit rushed, the result didn't seem rushed at all. The officials walked all the way here and felt that they couldn't find a second such grand coronation ceremony in the history of Dahuan. At this moment, they didn't know that the shock had just begun. When it was almost the auspicious time, they saw the two people walking over together. Yes, it wasn't the emperor standing in the same place and the empress walking towards him. Instead, it was the two of them walking down the long stairs together. Shen Yu didn't expect that Shang Junlin would be waiting outside the hall. After that, he stayed by his side. Shang Junlin was still wearing the black robe that symbolized the emperor's status. It was embroidered with a dragon pattern with vermilion thread, which complemented Shen Yu's robe. The ceremonial officer stood at the side and read out a congratulatory message. Today was a good day with warm sunshine. One of Shen Yu's hands was held in Shang Junlin's. The two of them slowly walked up the stairs to the top. When the auspicious time arrived, the Minister of Rites stood up and opened the imperial edict that had been prepared early in the morning. The imperial edict was personally written by Shang Junlin. The first part was normal, but when it came to the latter part, the officials all widened their eyes and looked at Shang Junlin, who was whispering to Shen Yu in disbelief. At this moment, their only thought was, how could His Majesty be so childish? Because of Shen Yu's male identity, Shang Junlin chose Shen Yu as the Empress instead of the Empress. However, this wasn't the main point. The main point was that the imperial edict said that the Empress would share power with the Emperor. What did this mean? It meant that everything that Shang Junlin owned would be shared by Shen Yu as the Empress. Seeing the Empress was like seeing His Majesty. Shang Junlin didn't give Shen Yu a fancy title, but what he gave Shen Yu was incomparable. Some of the officials subconsciously wanted to speak out, but their sleeves were pulled down by the people beside them, and they barely restrained their movements. No matter what they thought, they couldn't ruin this ceremony. His Majesty was obviously determined to do this. The imperial edict had been written for so many days, but there was no news at all. Even if they opposed it now, what could they do? Nothing could change it. After the Minister of Rites finished reading, the surroundings fell into silence. Some of the officials were so shocked by the news that they hadn't come back to their senses. Some of them had mixed feelings, and some of them had the same expression from beginning to end. When Shen Yu heard it, he was also shocked. Shang Junlin had mentioned the title Empress to him before, but the sharing of power had never been mentioned from beginning to end. After going through the process with mixed feelings, Shen Yu was extremely tired. Compared to the grandeur of the ceremony, there was a tedious process. Fortunately, he only had to go through it once. After the ceremony, there would be a big banquet in the palace. Shang Junlin accompanied Shen Yu back to his bedroom. Without him, the officials gathered together and talked about what had just happened. His Majesty did this. Are we just going to acquiesce? One of the officials asked. His Majesty really kept it a secret. He only let us know at the last moment. In fact, if you think about it carefully, it wasn't completely untraceable. His Majesty had set a higher standard than the previous Empress conferral ceremonies. At that time, he had even discussed it in the morning court. Isn't that? We all thought that this was to show His Majesty's love for the Empress. Who knew that this was His Majesty's real intention? Prime Minister and Fong Darren didn't know either. So what if we knew? So what if we didn't know? Even if we knew in advance, His Majesty wouldn't change his mind because of our opposition. Are we just going to let His Majesty do as he pleases? Actually, think about it. If the Empress is here, Dahuan can continue to develop like it has in the past 2 years. It's not a bad thing. The Empress has received so much love, and His Majesty doesn't hide political affairs from him. If he really wanted to do something, he would have done it long ago. The Empress's character is trustworthy. Moreover, he is a man. It's a waste of his talent to only be in the harem. His Majesty probably thinks so too, so he made such a decision. The palace was a festive red. The decorations in the bedroom were also mainly red. The palace servants also wore red decorations. Everyone had a happy smile on their faces. Shang Junlin and Shen Yu were very generous. They rewarded him for this joyous occasion. Shen Yu walked to the bed and sat down. The bed curtains, quilts, pillows, everything was red. Mu Shi brought the food over. After putting it down, she left with the palace servants. Shen Yu sat on the bed and looked up at Shang Junlin. The man's clothes today were slightly different from before. This royal robe was obviously a match for Shen Yu's. Even the pattern on the cuffs was exactly the same. His Majesty is different from usual today. What's different? You look especially good today. Shen Yu smiled. You too. Shang Junlin stared at him. Shen Yu looked very different today. His black hair was tied up high. Coupled with his dignified wedding dress, he was so dazzling that people couldn't take their eyes off him. Shen Yu turned his face away slightly. His face was flushed because of Shang Junlin's gaze. Shang Junlin retracted his gaze and brought over a bowl of hot chicken porridge. Are you hungry? Shen Yu touched his stomach and nodded. He took the bowl from Shang Junlin. After eating, he regained some strength. Fortunately, there is only one empress coronation ceremony. If there is another one, I won't do it. The entire process took almost an entire day. He even had to get up very early in the morning. Shang Junlin sat beside Shen Yu. Does you want to do it again? No. Shen Yu picked up a handkerchief and wiped his mouth. He asked about what happened during the day. His Majesty, it's fine if you confer the Empress, but why did you also create a power-sharing arrangement? At that time, Shen Yu noticed the expressions on the faces of the ministers. It was obvious that Shang Junlin hid this matter from the ministers. Didn't you say that you would give Yu a birthday gift? Yu promised me. Even if Yu wants to back out now, it's too late. Shang Junlin looked at Shen Yu with tender eyes. Your Majesty, aren't you afraid that you will be flooded with impeachment memorials tomorrow? This kind of thing had only happened once in history. Shen Yu didn't think that the ministers would accept it well. Yu doesn't need to worry. Since I did this, I naturally considered their objections. There won't be any problems. Shang Junlin caressed Shen Yu's face. Under the contrast of red, the youth's skin looked fairer. His lips were red and tempting. From now on, Shen Yu would completely belong to him. Everyone in the world would know that they only belonged to each other. Thinking of this, Shang Junlin's chest heated up. Shen Yu tilted his head and rubbed Shang Junlin's hand. Your Majesty, this is the big gift you mentioned. Not at first. I originally wanted to ask Yu if she wanted to be my empress after the birthday banquet. I didn't expect those ministers to bring it up first. I can't be outdone by those ministers. Since they brought up the matter of the empress first, I will give you unparalleled power in the world. Your Majesty, why are you competing with those ministers? Shen Yu found it funny. I want to give Yu the best of everything. It's not a competition. Shang Junlin thought. Even if he didn't do this, he would give Shen Yu everything. When you really like someone, you will want to give them everything. You want to give them the best of everything. Even though he was the Emperor of Dahuan, in front of Shen Yu, Shang Junlin was just a man who wanted to please his sweetheart. Your Majesty, Shang Junlin put his index finger on Shen Yu's lips. I know that Yu's ambition doesn't lie here. I've said it before. Because I want to give, I will give. Yu doesn't have to feel burdened. Everything will be fine as usual. Yu can do whatever she likes. It's even better if she can bring me along. After saying that, Shang Junlin clapped his hands. A palace servant came in with wine and placed it on the table closest to them. Then, he left. Shang Junlin stood up and poured 2 cups of wine. Is this an intoxicating fruit wine? You has always been greedy. Why don't you try it today? Shin Yu took 1 cup and sniffed it. The fruit fragrance mixed with the wine fragrance. It had been too long since Shin Yu drank it, so he almost forgot the taste. Your Majesty, do you want to drink wine with me again? Shang Junlin's eyes deepened. Both of them crossed their arms. The wine was about to be drunk by the host in 1 gulp. Under the red candlelight, everything seemed ambiguous and hazy. Shin Yu remembered his first meeting with Shang Junlin on the day he entered the palace. At that time, he thought that it was a good deal for him to enter the palace because of his face. Now that he thought about it, it was indeed a good deal. What is you laughing at? Shin Yu didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed the man's collar and pulled hard. He was lying on the bed. The man supported his body with his arms and looked at him as if he had lit a fire. I thought about the day I entered the palace. Your Majesty, what were you thinking when you saw me that day? At that time, I thought that no matter how much I hear from others, it's better to see you in person. Only after seeing you with your own eyes would you know how amazing you were. What a coincidence. Shin Yu thought the same at that time. Shang Junlin raised his hand and took off Shin Yu's hair crown. His black hair scattered and covered the red wedding quilt. Shang Junlin's eyes deepened. His fingers moved down and traced the young man's delicate facial features. Your Majesty, are you still going to the court? Shin Yu hooked his arm around Shang Junlin's neck and asked. No. Shang Junlin's voice was low and hoarse. Shin Yu chuckled. He hooked his arm around the man's neck and kissed him. Soon, he became the host. The candlelight flickered and the red bed curtain fell. Their figures could be vaguely seen. No matter how much time passed, their story would never stop. A genius remembers this website in 1 second. www.biku50. CC Literature Mobile Version Website, M. Biku50. CC.